Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. And this should be the first episode of my podcast series. With me, I have Viking, and we're going to talk about money, economics, and those kind of things. Basically, the idea came as I was binge watching some YouTube videos, and I figured it would be a nice thing to discuss it with somebody with a bit more experience than I have. And I guess we just made a podcast, I came up with the idea to make a podcast, and now we're gonna discuss stuff. So let's head right into it. Um, I did prepare 5 videos to just watch, but of course we can also discuss other topics. Maybe if somebody in the chat has any like good questions or I guess just topics to bring up, then we would be happy to discuss those as well. But I did prepare from the YouTube channel How Money Works 5 different videos. I mean, just a disclaimer that I'm not really that experienced with money yet. I've lived a pretty shattered life so far, but I'm always open to learn, and just surfing the internet gives me some sort of basic competence. Not much. I wouldn't really trust myself with it, but it kind of teaches you how to be more open about just learning stuff. So, anything you want to say before we jump into the first video, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, right? A lot of people, and it's not always certainly about money, right? It's just also about like everything surrounding money. At at the end of the day, everyone needs to kind of know a little bit about money.
Yeah, it's
Even if
basically
they, yeah, it runs everything.
our entire world
Um,
is just made out of needing money, like being alive costs money in a way. Not knowing
exactly.
something costs money, like for example lawyers or any kind of specialist that you have to hire instead of just
I
learning it
mean,
yourself.
not knowing about money can cost you money.
That as well. There are
It-
money specialists as well who
yeah,
also like managers and stuff who manage your estate if you are rich enough, or just
and
just
even the best people
taxes.
who
Yeah,
know all about money lose money. So. But yeah, let's get into the first video, and I think it's a good starting point to talk about it
yeah.
for sure.
There is this common misconception that if you are rich enough that your happiness doesn't really increase. Of course that comes from the very very old myth that money doesn't bring happiness, which is obviously false to a degree.
Mhm.
But let's hear how money works, elaborate on it, and let's discuss whether we think he's right or wrong, or let's just see.
$75,000 per year. This is the number often referred to as the cutoff, where more money will no longer bring you any more happiness. This is largely in thanks to a widely misquoted 2010 study conducted by these two gentlemen, Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton. Since this was published, all manner of outlets have perpetuated this idea that conveniently falls in line with other tropes like money can't buy happiness and money is the root of all evil, mo money, mo problems, you get the gist. The issue
I mean, again, just not knowing something costs money, as we said. So basically, whoever has the knowledge, I guess, kind of, it's in his interest to keep it that way. Maybe that's why these myths kind of spread. Like, money doesn't bring happiness. Don't. I don't even know what kind of stuff they
I
say nowadays.
I think a lot of times, well, just in my personal opinion, it kind of evolved because so many people don't have a lot of money.
Well, that's also fair.
And it's a bit like how a lot of these sayings start. Someone uh had you know had some interest in promoting that idea, right?
Yeah, just
Um,
preserving the status quo, I guess.
Well, it's like the money milk strengthens your bones, right?
Hmm.
Or an apple a day keeps the doctor away. A lot of those sayings were started by like government agencies, like milk makes your bones strong. That was like in the 60s and 70s
Oh
when
yeah.
milk
Oh.
after the war. I'm gonna go into some facts here. So after the war, after World War II, so much milk was being produced due to war needs or whatever. There was just too much, so the government started buying milk products from milk farmers to like help them, and so they started these campaigns to sell milk and stuff to make money. And so it's a bit like this. I think studies and stuff like this, making it so that money doesn't buy happiness. Making maybe people a little more happy with less. With if you make less money, maybe that's not a reason to not
I
be
mean,
happy, something like that.
that's fair.
Um,
Happiness is also relative in a way, like how you perceive it, but I think there's a difference between just uh, money or not having money and the milk example that you've brought up. Like, it's about morality, I think. Like, it's not necessarily evil to like push the all the milk products onto the people when you have a like an overflowing supply of it. That's
yeah,
like
but that's
you
like
have
I
to
was
get
just
rid of it
saying.
somehow, and
I meant it more as in like how certain people can push an idea,
oh
even though
yeah.
it might not necessarily be true. So I think we should watch a little more of the video and like see
Mhm.
where that idea maybe came from. I'm
Issue,
kind of
though,
interested.
is that it's simply not true. Welcome to the first video made by How Money Works. If you enjoy this video, please consider liking and
He
subscribing.
deserves it, yeah.
The first clue for anybody misquoting this study should be in the title of the study itself. High income improves the evaluation of life, but not emotional well-being. What this means in plain English is that people with higher incomes don't necessarily experience higher levels of day-to-day happiness. However, long-term, they do generally have a more positive outlook on life. This phenomenon is most likely to be explained by the psychological theory of the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is the observed tendency of humans to revert back to a relatively stable level of happiness, in spite of any major life changes, positive or negative. Let's put it this way. If you win the lotto, you will probably lose your mind from happiness. But as time passes and
Clearly.
you swiped your card more times than you can count, the novelty of the situation
Factual,
will have
actually.
passed. This is not because of entitlement, it's just human nature.
Maybe
This
we can
is
pause here.
your
Yeah, like
I
normal. Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
feel like I see it a lot where like I think you'll see a lot more people man, it's kind of hard to explain, but like you see a lot of people with like lower income be a lot more happy with what they have because um there's not many things like they you know they can't find easily find new ways of happiness. I feel like because a lot of the things that like create adrenaline or are fun for us these days have like a money barrier, right? Even like going to a park, sometimes you have to like €1 fee to go to a park with trees, but sometimes there is that fee and you may not have that €1.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like that's why you may see some people maybe easy like happy with simple things, and rather than rich people, they have so many avenues of happiness that a lot of it's kind of artificial, right? They've had to buy their happiness for so long that some of them may realize, some of them are okay with that. They keep buying happiness because they have money, they can keep buying it. But it's not as the sources of happiness, I would say, aren't as effective or long lasting. People with lower
Actually.
income may
Mhm.
may have more fun with their family, or or friends, etc. I don't know.
Well, related to
It
that,
feels that way.
I think I did read a good TED earlier about this. Like it was something along if you are rich, you are not really forced to have good networking and good like connections and friends who can just make some stuff happen for you. For example, like a car repair service. Like if you are rich, you don't really have to establish good connections with salons like that. You can just walk into any single one of them. But among the poorer communities, I think people just know each other more and more. Like they have a bunch of friends to rely on. They do stuff for each other. Like they can trust each other more. I guess it's kind of like if somebody is rich, they view a lot of people, or if not everyone, as competition in a way. Or I guess they are more wary of other people. So that could be
I
one source. Like just
Yeah, and I actually read someone in your chat said let's differentiate between low income and unstable survival. I 100%
that's
agree with that. There are definite degrees of wealth, and at some point beneath a certain threshold, there just isn't enough money to do almost anything. Or just isn't money to live even. And I think there are some videos later on that might address that. But I think here, just when it comes to does money buy your happiness, it's definite. Certain things that are true and aren't true. And I think a lot of people would disagree, but it's a good topic to evaluate.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you are having financial struggles and suffer because of that, then obviously it affects your happiness as well.
Yeah, it's a
Like
whole different
yeah.
almost issue, basically. Yeah, maybe we can continue the video.
New normal. The same effect happens in reverse. If you get fired tomorrow, you will no doubt experience a drop in happiness. But after you break the news to your friends and family and find a new job, you will eventually return to a relatively consistent level of happiness. Now, there is a bit more to this study than just one quirk of human psychology. Another component most people tend to overlook is the process by which these researchers eventually came to their conclusion. The study was conducted on 709,000 households, which were asked to give details about their income and then answer questions pertaining to human happiness. How often do you feel stressed? How do you think your life will look in 5 years? How often do you smile? You know, the questions you ask on that awkward first date. Their answers then produced a score on the Cantrell ladder, which is a general ranking system rating people from hopeless depression to thriving prosperity. What was interesting is that this study suggested that the USA, where this study was conducted, actually did very well generally in day-to-day indicators like smiling, laughing, and enjoyment of activities, but did very poorly in long-term indicators like stress, where the nation was the 5th highest out of 151 other countries where similar studies had been conducted. Overall, though, the 709,000 households did quite well, with the average Cantrell score of 6.76 out of 10, which puts it into 9th place of all studied countries, behind only Scandinavia, Canada, Switzerland, and New Zealand. So don't worry, the American spirit is alive and well.
Can you pause it real quick?
Well,
I do just really quickly. I feel like if you ask a study, I wonder how many people they asked were homeless, you know, or had access to internet, or I feel like there's a certain baseline of having things that was kind of like, evaluated in this case, like,
yeah,
you know,
like a
who are
confirmation
they
bias.
asking? Yeah, like or just like a certain amount, like,
Like, if it's not a random
don't know.
sample, then yeah.
Yeah, is it like a random sample, but like of how, like, people with house, like, who had housing and stuff? I wonder where that data. Yeah,
Because
I don't want to interrupt too much of the video, but that maybe that's something to think about.
yeah, another thing to like take away from this part is that they were talking about America and why they were kind of smiling and like better off. They were also more stressful in a way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it depends. It depends. But yeah, I don't want to interrupt the video too much. But I thought that was an interesting thing. I was
yeah, that
thinking about.
is, yeah, like no study can be perfect, of course, but there is like, I think that bias is kind of obvious if now that you mention it.
I mean, there's definitely value in that assessment. Right?
True.
But I think there's a certain threshold of. But yeah, it kind of comes with that argument. Does money buy you happiness? The money equates to maybe having a house, et cetera, et cetera. So I just thought
Yeah, you just said households. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a mortgage on the house or
apartment, or even if you're renting, but they have a place to live.
and like most of them are households are associated with families, so they are like established and kind of well off people, maybe most of them, or at least they look like ones.
Poor households as well.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I mean, who's going to want to fill in that survey? I don't know. It was just an interesting point. So.
But alas, here is what most people get wrong. More income did noticeably increase long-term happiness indicators in households being studied. It just didn't really have much of an impact on short-term indicators thanks to our good old friend, the hedonic treadmill. $75,000 a year is the generally accepted point at which money doesn't become a day-to-day struggle, but may still be a limiting factor towards more long-term goals like buying a house, getting out of debt, retiring early, or simply going on a nice vacation. Or at least that's the massively oversimplified, albeit far more accurate, conclusion. Furthermore, most people quoting this study still ignore two other major problems with this number: the variables and the timing. In general, science experiments, there are variables. The dependent variable here is the short-term and long-term happiness of a household. The independent variable is the total annual household income. However, to have a direct correlation in a perfect study, other variables must be controlled. This study assumes that all households function exactly the same, which is obviously not true. To a young single professional with a low cost of living, no student loan debt, $75,000 per year would actually be extremely comfortable. But to a family of 5, paying off a mortgage and student loans all the while living in the city of Los Angeles, this income would be entirely inadequate. Another factor of
Yeah, that's also felt like the place of living varies from place to place as well, and of course the household income depends on how many members are in a household, of course.
True.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's kind of like the idea I was introducing earlier, right? Like these households, what are they consisting of? Where are they living? Who are they with? And especially in a country like the United States, states are literally different countries, basically. Different climate, different laws, different everything. So,
yeah, like
it's
California or Texas is way way richer than some middle American, like middle North American states.
yeah, I'd love to see like global stats almost, but again, we're harping on it.
Yeah,
It's a video,
it's
so
just the
yeah,
amount basically.
yeah, it's like semantics basically. But
Mhm.
I still think that yeah,
Yeah, but age was more relevant in a way, like age and how many members are in a household, for example.
yeah, but I think like the money doesn't buy happiness type of thing. I think it really equates to it's too simple of an idea in my opinion. Money, it's like it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. It's like some crazy math equation that is probably unsolved to be able to like equal happiness. Something like that almost.
Yeah, although
Um,
it doesn't really buy happiness, it enables you to seek it.
yeah, it's like whenever I think of like things that I want to do for fun with friends, it always
Mhm.
starts with I'm usually not going to do it alone, but I can still do things that are fun alone. But let's say, it always starts with having like a variable of like a friend, a family member, or maybe just myself, but a person, one, right? And then like the barrier is almost always money to do what I want to do. If it's traveling, there's very little that doesn't cost money.
Oh, did my camera
They
just die? Hold on.
did it?
It just stopped glowing. Give me a second.
No worries.
Just
Um,
keep on going, I guess.
yeah, but I do think that yeah, it's very hard. I think you to answer that question, you need like a world that doesn't have money, and then ask that question, maybe almost. But I'd like to see like the conclusion maybe of the video to see what they say.
Yeah, just give me one moment. I
Yeah, no worries.
don't
Take
know
your time.
what's up with my camera. Video. It should be back now, right? Let me go back in the call. Turn on camera. Oh, did actually Discord take over the? Hold on. No way. Did like the OBS virtual camera just take over? Oh my.
I
Wait,
don't, maybe just check your settings, your Discord settings. Try
wait. Now
enabling and re-enabling.
the only
Like
available camera is the OBS virtual camera. What is going on?
maybe plug in and plug out your camera, plug it back in.
That's gonna be difficult since it's like behind the computer, like
Really?
behind the desk.
Um,
Also worried about OBS just. Hmm. But when I clicked the test camera, it did work. Maybe if I restart my Discord, just give me 1 second.
take your time. Take
Okay, technical difficulties, please stand by, guys. Just please stand by. Yeah, this.
Hello.
Hello, I'm back. Let me see if I can turn on the camera now. Turn on camera. No, it's the OBS. What the hell? Oh, I think I have it now. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
I
Let's
don't know
try
what
again.
happened, but
I'm just technical.
okay. So pop out, share your screen, and go live. And yeah, we should be back. There we go. There we go.
Is the OBS scene good again?
Yeah, I think it's working properly now.
Okay.
So let's go on. But wait, were you like in the middle of a sentence when we had to?
No, I was just interested to see what their conclusion is
Mhm.
based on.
Well, let's see that then.
Concern that people tend to gloss over is the timing of the study. These results were published 11 years ago, and since then, due to inflation, $75,000 per year would actually be around $90,000 per year, which is starting to look like a much higher benchmark for day-to-day happiness. Another problem with quoting figures from 11 years ago, particularly as it relates to people's finances, is the big elephant in the room: the global financial crisis. In 2008 and 2009, as this data was being collected, people were living through a period of massive layoffs, stock market drops, and foreclosures that hit the aspirational middle class particularly hard. Controlling for all these unusual conditions means most households would usually have more day-to-day satisfaction because they wouldn't be hurting from watching all their accumulated wealth disappear, which is one of those problems that lower-income households just don't have. You can't lose wealth if you've never had it in the first place. Now, it's a real shame that this figure has embedded itself into the public psyche, because it actually does a lot of harm.
And that's also a factor, yeah, inflation, but the larger one is that if you lose like, let's say 50% of your assets, like or the just the net worth of your assets, stocks and everything else basically, like if you have more money, it hits you way harder. Let's say if somebody lives like month to month, basically like has no savings and everything else, they don't lose much. Life just goes on as it was before, except maybe
True.
some inflation, but that's all.
Again, it's a lot of the times I think it's just in this here it just equates what are you using your money for, right? If you don't have any money, you're finding happiness in other ways. I think if you have money, a lot of things you're doing require extreme amounts of money, and when you have it, it's no issue. And then not having it just creates stress, creates all these main issues, especially if you're supporting a lot of these businessmen and women. They're probably supporting a wide array of family members, just out of ease. You want to give them this life, an easy life where you're paying off a couple houses because you could afford it back then. uh,
Yeah, it's
so
like living within your means basically.
yeah, but I don't, it's the fact that you're just buying. Yeah, it's just different lifestyles.
I mean, once
One
you are,
uses money and the other
yeah,
consumes.
once you have a certain upkeep in a way, you are expected to just keep that at least stagnant or increase it. And the higher the value, the more stress comes with it, right?
I mean, I can't see it here, but when was the video published in this one?
2021 this year.
2021. I wonder if they have like a COVID section, uh, because during COVID you really
Hmm.
had to find what gave you happiness, because otherwise you were having a terrible time, and many people just couldn't find that and were having a terrible time.
I
Um,
think the EVE Online videos it talk about it a bit, I guess, but
they
I
talk a bit about COVID. Okay.
like
So yeah,
just.
we have a couple videos, but it just because there weren't really many things that you could do, regardless of money, if you had it or
Mhm.
not, that brought you happiness. And so sometimes it was a person that came living with you just during that time to help you. But yeah, I think if there was any like recent example for the people watching or for us, it's COVID.
Yeah,
The
it's
things that gave you happiness then, were they related to money? Were they not? I would say a lot of the times they weren't. But I think it's just like, during that time we just found different ways of like to find happiness, and they just didn't, have money in the equation because it wouldn't have done anything.
yeah. Some people
So,
took it better, some people adapted worse, I guess. But
mhm.
stuff still costs money during COVID as well. And if you don't have it, then oh boy, that time was sure stressful, like the first few months of the lockdown.
For sure, for sure.
Like if you
If you
don't,
have a business
yeah,
or anything like that.
like if you don't really have savings, which let's be honest, more and more people don't have, and not because they decide not to have it, because of
Yeah, they just
other
can't.
variables, yeah.
Exactly.
Then I don't think you even have time to pursue your happiness. You have to just make do and just
Yeah, basically.
upkeep the very basic functionalities of your life.
Hmm. For sure.
Yeah, and the inflation as well, of course. Like these past 2 years increased the inflation by a big margin.
Yeah, quite insane amounts actually.
And I'm afraid to see what the future brings for us, but that's
Yeah.
maybe we'll eventually see.
Hmm.
So let's go on with the video.
A more recent study on the exact same issue, researchers found a significant dip in the same happiness metrics among households that earned over $75,000 per
Oh.
year. A significant contributor to this strange anomaly was that people had thought that they made it to peak happiness, when the reality was very different. So the question is, how much money do you need to maximize happiness? And the answer is more. And while this sounds like the most unsatisfying answer there is, it's just about as accurate as it gets. The findings from all similar studies on this issue have found that overall happiness increases with income, whilst negative emotions fall at a similar rate without any perceivable plateau at a particular income level. It does, however, have a logarithmic relationship leading to diminishing returns of every additional dollar. What this means is that if a person went from an income level of $25,000 per year to $50,000 per year, their happiness metrics might increase by 50%. If someone added the same $25,000 pay raise to a salary of $250,000, that impact would be far less significant. Instead, they would need to increase their salary by $250,000 per year to achieve the same increase in happiness as a low-income household.
Wow, that's pretty heavy actually. Like
I mean, it makes sense.
it does in
I
a
just
way,
feel like
but
it's like a weird now, like not like, yeah, I don't know. I find it weird. Like the person who has 25,000 and 250,000, like their problems I feel like to their lives are far more significant and far like have far more far-reaching consequences. Like if you're earning 25,000 a year, like you may have a hard time paying your bills, buying food, or paying for your children, buying new clothing, everything. At 250,000, those like those basics aren't really there. You may be concerned when your next holiday is, or if your pool bill is going to be excessive this year. Like I find that a bit weird. But yeah, I mean, when you're earning 250,000, just things become easier. I'd say, especially in this world, since
mm,
money is like the kind
mhm.
of the gateway.
Yeah,
So
even if this magic number, either 75k or 90k, if you are talking about today's prices, is not really a good way to measure it, it's still there for a reason. Like it's still people still come people still came to this conclusion because of a reason. Like if you make less than that, then you will be struggling.
I mean, less than 75,000 is still a good wage.
That
Depending on where you
depends, yeah.
are. Are you gonna be able to buy a house, in 10 years? Maybe not. You're probably not gonna have that many costs. It's gonna take you, your usual 30 years for people to buy a house.
Probably with the
So
mortgage as well, and just keep paying it off
yeah,
until you retire, basically.
I mean, yeah, but that's like just good economic practice to have a mortgage. And maybe there's a video about that, but yeah, I think just in this case, I found it a bit weird to like equate like the happiness level to like doubling the income just by adding 25,000 on each side. But
Yeah,
like
it's
I find it weird because that like one alleviates extreme stress and kind of elevates someone out of poverty, and the other is, you know, it's just when am I gonna go on vacation next? You know, so I found that a bit weird.
yeah, that's why I think as the video said, that's why exactly you need to double the money, not just add the flat amount.
Yeah, it's like not a good metric to study people by.
I mean that's why it's logarithmic. Yeah, the study was wrong there as well. Like, according to us and the How Money Works
And the
YouTube channel
video,
as well. So we agree on that.
Happiness builds with proportional increases in income, not nominal increases. Hence, the other reason you need more income to be happy. People were found to be most satisfied if they were receiving consistent, predictable increases in their income through pay raises, promotions, or business growth. A constant upwards trajectory from a modest income was far more mentally satisfying than income that is stagnant or declining, even if it was several times larger to begin with. Which makes sense. A constant supply of small rewards keeps the happy brain juices flowing. The final thing to understand about this headline is how the data actually works. When researchers analyze the data, they look for far more than just a simple correlation. They also look for how significant the data is or how much of the outcome is explained by the relationship between what they were studying. In this case, it would be the relationship between happiness and income, as opposed to the millions of other factors that contribute to happiness. The researchers of the original paper found that this relationship accounted for about 37% of the expected variance, which is huge. But it still means 63% of people's happiness was determined by other factors. These other factors are things like health, meaningful relationships with family and friends, and even things with a negative relationship with income like work-life balance. The upshot of this is that someone on a modest income could be happier than a very wealthy person who was unhealthy, lonely, and constantly stressed over work they couldn't separate themselves from. But let us know what you think. How much money do you think you would need to be happy? The comment section helps out the channel, and it would be really interesting to see all the different opinions on this. Thanks for learning how money works.
Again, maybe it's because we're trying to like maybe search a little deeper than the video's giving us. But like I feel like it's pretty explicable why the things that they've said are like, yeah, of course the person who like who's very rich isn't gonna really find happiness in their money because
It
or by an
depends.
increase in money because the increase in money doesn't affect them, but the increase in money for someone in lower income is 100% going to alleviate stress. And someone they said they might find happiness in other ways, like in having a good health or in doing other activities or work-life balance. But those things all relate to money in my
Basically, yeah.
opinion, at
Health
least. Like
especially, yeah.
health, especially in the United States, if you have more money, you're going to be like, oh, going to the hospital isn't a problem. But some people just don't go to a hospital because they have no money, in the United States, at
Not
least.
gonna lie, that is very scary for me. Like,
Yeah, I don't
imagine
understand.
not
Yeah.
having universal healthcare.
Yeah, it would scare me extreme. Like, just taking an ambulance costing like $1,000.
Like,
That's crazy.
the USA is legit on the short list of the countries which I would not move to. Like, surprisingly, even if it's
I think if you're middle class, high middle class, or rich, I would move to the States. I think you'd have a great time. I think
that's
there's so many
fair.
things that you can do there, with money that it's crazy. It's a good life you live.
Yeah, but for a
Low,
regular person, especially
regular,
from
yeah,
Europe, yeah. Like if you
yeah.
moving from somewhere else, then it may be a big improvement. But compared to Europe, I mean, we have our own problems, of course, but in this department, we are doing much better.
Yeah. And someone in your chat, Miss Lady Halloween, said maybe I just missed it, but am I the only one annoyed by the uncertainty of the definition of a household? Yeah, we kind of addressed it earlier. Like we were like, what is a household? Or the fact that it's a household, meaning probably that they're living somewhere. Does that mean that they didn't really survey anybody of lower income who doesn't have a house, or the homeless? The people with no money at all, to assess their happiness, kind of would maybe help answer the question: does money buy happiness?
Yeah,
So yeah,
and
that uncertainty was definitely something that we addressed. That was a little weird.
yeah, and like, was that one answer per household, like the just the opinion of all the inhabitants there, or?
Yeah, was it the person who made the most money in the household, or everyone in the household, or two? Yeah, that was a good question. Yes.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think a channel like How Money Works probably would, making a video like that is a no brainer.
I mean, this
It
is
would
just a very good entry point, I guess, for most people. Like this myth is obviously false, but people don't really know how to explain it, which aspects to look at. So yeah, this is a
Yeah,
good starter video.
to probably give my final say on the video, I'd say money does in 80% of the case provides you with more happiness. But like, yeah, there needs to be a certain baseline of happiness, I guess, in my opinion, and it just adds on top of that. But if you're missing some fundamentals, like good family life or friends, you don't even. I mean, some people, unfortunately, have lost a lot of members of their family, or single, or are solo in life, but have a great friend group and stuff, right? So it's not the only thing you need, but just having that baseline of happiness is probably very important, and that's something money can't buy. So I think having that baseline is probably crucial.
Yeah, so basically, if you are missing money, then it can bring unhappiness, and if you have, there is no hard cap on the happiness level coming from money either, but it's not the only, like,
Yeah,
not
I
the
mean
only
it's like the icing on
contributor.
the cake. Are you gonna
Mhm.
say no to a couple extra scoops? I don't think so. But when you're missing the scoops, you're gonna be like, shit.
Well, what does it cost though? Like extra stress, extra time? That's the.
I mean, it can affect everyone differently.
Mhm.
You know, let's say you're well off, you have a house, you have a car, whatever, and all of a sudden it disappears. You're gonna have many different types of questions. But if you have no money, if it disappears, those your problems that you've already you still have remain. Nothing's added on or anything like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, if you have no savings or no money and something catastrophic happens to you, then you have to reorganize your entire life just to fix that.
Mhm.
All
So
right.
yeah, it's a different. Yeah, I don't think you can just correlate to money. Basically, this is what I would say for sure.
Oh boy, here's a good topic, interesting topic.
Saving money won't save you.
Yeah, you will never retire. Here's why, apparently. I mean, before the
Doomer
video,
gloomer. It's great clicks. It makes for a great video. Clicks.
yeah, to be fair, yeah, like just before the
That's a
video,
clickbait title right there.
it is. That's why I
Yeah.
actually know it as well, probably. But
True.
yeah, I'm actually pretty like pessimistic about the future, so I'm not sure if I ever get to retire. But
I mean,
not because yeah.
we've already talked about it, right? Making good practices and stuff. Even if you think you can't make them, uh, when it comes to savings. But maybe we could talk about that when
I'm more
because
worried about the
talk about
environment and the climate and everything else, and that's why I'm pessimistic. But yeah, let's see what he has to say about
You
these
pay
things.
attention at school, you study hard, get a good job, work diligently through your career, all so that one day you can just kick back and enjoy a nice, pleasant retirement. That's the story, anyway. But it's not one that always lives up to reality. There are countless stories of people with good jobs and diligent savings patterns still needing to work well into their twilight years. This is to say nothing of people that unfortunately never have the privileges of higher education or a stable career. Recent reports have found that less than 30% of American workers are on track to retire at all, and even fewer think that they will have a comfortable retirement, and they might be right. I know you didn't want to hear this, but there are a few big factors in the world today that are acting to keep most younger generations in the workforce indefinitely.
maybe we can pause here real
This
quick.
is all
I feel like I already know why that's the case. Like, I read a statistic last week, like, the average net worth of a 20-year-old in the United States is like negative $48,000. And it's a shame that, they're taking a very US centric approach, but I mean, I guess, a lot of
He's
you
probably
20
from
years
the
are from the
USA, yeah.
US. Yeah. But I don't think that's necessarily the case in Europe. I feel like a lot of universities and ways of income and stuff like that. You're not paying off like the first 10 years of your working life to control your debt or make sure that they're not it doesn't increase and you're paying it off. So I it's a shame like yeah, I feel like I've already said that, but it's a shame the video takes that user-centric approach. Because I don't know, I feel like if once I have zero debt now. Um, I know friends that have some debt. They've had to take a loan because their living situation wasn't great. To buy books, get some housing for university. But even that might equate to maybe 5, 10,000, which I would consider a lot already for a student. But some U.S. students have to take, 60K loans at 18 years old. That's crazy.
You can just
Um,
expect an 18-year-old to make this decision. Like,
yeah. So I don't know.
I'm a
I
lot
just
more
think that
lucky compared to the US like university students because it costs less than 1/10 of what it costs there, and also I have a unique opportunity like in my country. If I work here for the same amount of years as I've been studying, then the debt will be forgiven. So
oh, there you go.
that kind of
So
I guess it gives an incentive to make people stay here after graduating. But I can also
yeah, I
just
mean,
Mhm.
so I think the circumstances are different, but maybe the video, the ideas in the video might still be
Yeah,
correct. So
I think this
we'll
is a
see.
way more complex topic than just that.
Hmm.
before considering the major hiccup that the COVID-19 pandemic has been. A global event that has actually worked to widen the gap between younger generations with fewer assets and more precarious employment versus older generations which tend to be more secure. Now, you might think that you are different. You contribute to your 401k, save diligently, subscribe to How Money Works, and even invest regularly into the stock market. Well, that's all great, but I might still have some bad news for you. There are lots of issues at play here: housing, the stock market, and a series of broader economic conditions which might threaten the general assumptions we make about indefinite growth. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why we will all be on that grind until we are 120 years old. So, the
120.
obvious first culprit is housing. Affording a home has become a major challenge for most workers in the USA. I know this problem
And
is
in Europe.
nothing new, but there are
That's
still a
true.
few
Yeah.
very important factors that people don't consider. Even very high income earners that graduate from top universities and go into fields like investment banking or big tech tend to be moving to equally high cost of living areas like New York, Chicago, or San Francisco. Pew
Same in Europe.
Research recently reported that a majority
It's the same in Europe, basically. I mean, if you're going like prices in Paris, Amsterdam, London are almost the same as New York. Extremely high.
Yeah, for good jobs you need to have good opportunities, and that comes from being there in the
Yeah,
first
but I
place.
mean, again, our costs aren't necessarily the same. You know, your employer will probably give you extremely good healthcare. You probably don't need a car because public transport is very good, very modern, quite cheap.
Depends on where you work, yeah. Like in
But
most of the
I would agree about the housing part, though. The housing part is absolutely insane.
yeah, house prices are just through the roof right now, and
Yeah, it's nutty.
I mean, I think it's mainly because of just renting and people buying up homes to and investing in homes to rent them out, and also Airbnb and such. Like these all contribute to just the price going up and up.
That's definitely true. But I'd say also just COVID, the fact that people, a lot of people were in renting situations and have seen that it's so easy for landlords to kick them out or for them to run out of money. Right? And so buying a house seems like the safer option. You know, they were like, I might wait 5 more years just to make sure I have enough money. People are just saying, I need a house. I need somewhere I can
I
stay. I need someone to call myself home. Um, I need something that already has value, et cetera, et cetera. So I think COVID probably definitely gave that market a boost that it was already going on the up. So
I don't think somebody who rents usually could afford the house just paid in full. If anything, it's gonna be switching to a mortgage instead. Like instead of paying
oh no
rent,
no
they
no
would pay
no. I'm
mortgage
always
probably.
when I say buying a house, it's always like yeah, having taking out a loan for a house, even if you're rich, is a must. One, it gives you good credit. Two, no one, very few, even people who are rich, buy everything in cash straight up instantly. It's just with the fact that, like, let's say I take out $1 million today. In 10 years, that $10 million, like that $1 million, um, you know, might be due to inflation, like $200,000 cheaper. So money now is better than money later, due to inflation and other stuff. So taking out a loan like negates that price increase, and also it's just taking out money over time. Again, money now is better than money later. So yeah, it's very easy to pay over time. Yeah, there's many arguments to why taking out a loan, even if you have the money, is far better. You can do other things with that money. Let's say I only put out a $200,000 deposit. I have $1,000 mortgage, right? I have 800,000 other cash that I can invest in the stock market, make more money with that money. Like that's why being rich, it's a lot easier to make more money after your first million, right? Because you had that million could buy you other millions. So that's kind of the principle. So when I say buying a house, I mean usually you're always taking a mortgage. So that's why when you're renting an apartment, um, you know, it's just the people who were renting an apartment, who were thinking about buying a house, are now definitely buying a house. So that's kind of what's driving up the prices for sure.
I think another factor is that just buying real estate and renting it out is a very, very stable investment. Like people need somewhere to live, basically.
I
That's not
mean,
gonna change anytime soon.
it's
So
because you're buying something that'll always be used, a house, a place to live. Since no, ever since people started living in the same place, you know, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, whatever. Um, Land has always had value. So the land that has value, the assets in the house have value. Towns increase value, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very stable. It's probably the most stable investment you could have, bar maybe even like gold. I mean, gold might lose value all of a sudden. You know, it might find a huge deposit on some comet somewhere in 100 years with
mm,
a bajillion, trillion tons of gold, and gold might lose all value. But land will probably always have value. Even if you find 30 other planets, our population will grow and our land will still have value. So.
yeah, so you basically buy like a big, big house to rent out to multiple people, and of course you still own the house even though you are renting it out. So you are
I
getting
mean,
rent money. Your actual like net worth increases because the price of the house increases. It's just a good investment overall.
I mean, just because you own a house doesn't mean you have to rent it. You can also live in it and save other costs,
Yeah, but we are talking about like
et
investing
cetera.
into real estate. So if you
Oh, in
just
that way,
if
for
you are
sure,
just a landlord,
for sure.
that's
But
just
that also brings other costs with it. But yeah, in general, that's a very good practice.
yeah, like you have to maintain it and pay tax, of course, but it still gives you way more return than just gold, for example, that you can't really rent out.
I mean, plenty. You can rent out gold. Funny enough, you can use it to, give it. Banks love gold, and you can use it to facilitate other loans, etc. But actually, these days you can just pay an agency. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe later we could talk about our backgrounds and stuff. But my parents pay an agency to rent out our properties. It's low hassle. Yes, you're giving out, maybe you can't squeeze maximum amount of money out of it, but you lose the fact that you don't have to interact with the people who are renting it. Let's say they are troublemakers or they're destroying it. There's insurance through this, so a lot of added benefits of maybe giving an agency the keys and you just receive a monthly check based on the rent. So stuff like that. But
Yeah,
yes, I would say that having a property is probably the best investment, whether it has a house on it or not. But yeah.
and that's why the prices just keep climbing up and up until then. Like
Yeah,
what's gonna
a lot of
happen
people.
eventually?
A lot of people think that the housing market is going to crash sometime soon. It's a bubble, but a lot of people are thinking like it's 2008, right? It's going to crash like in 2008. But the thing is, there's just different circumstances. In 2008, the crash was mainly because so many loans were being given out and written out for people who just couldn't pay them back. So there was a loss of enormous, accounts of money. That isn't really the case now, but it's mostly, yeah, different economic standards that are being, maybe overwritten, and certain banks not wanting to make the same mistake as 2008, but in different circumstances. I don't know how in depth we can go with that, but yeah, it's not the same as 2008 or the mini bubble in 2010. So yeah, we're not the same fears basically.
Majority of young adults between the ages of 18 and 30 are now living at home with their parents. The median age of a first home buyer in 2019 was at 34, and experts agree it's almost inevitable that figure
That's
will be
young.
pushed even higher by the pandemic.
Yeah,
You feel
like
that's young, 34, to buy your first house?
it didn't used to be, but now it seems quite young. Like as
Yeah.
buy as in buying and paying in full or just mortgaging it. Because
Again,
you
no,
can
I don't think anyone would painful. Trust me.
or I guess paying it off in a way, like fully
Yeah.
owning
Finding the
it.
money to pay it off for sure. And having assets that you can use to get the loan, right? You need something. You need to show the bank something that'll give you the money. But yeah, I found 34. That's it. Was it what in 2009? The average age was 34. What did that? Was that it?
Well, something like that, but compared to like 2 or 3 generations ago, it's very different.
I mean, you could buy. I mean, 2 generations ago, you could buy a house for a lot cheaper as well. So,
And
but
it just
yeah.
keeps increasing constantly.
Mhm.
I mean, people say that living with your parents or with your family members is like something to be looked down upon, but it's really
If
not.
anything, it's financially smart. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm saving money, dude. You're living, paycheck to paycheck, and I'm saving money to buy a house. So I wouldn't see that as bad, especially these days. 'Cause so many people are living with their parents, and yeah, it's not as taboo as it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for sure. I'd say, especially after COVID, so many people moved back home. Yeah,
It's
it's definitely.
fortunate that the view of the people changed, but it's also unfortunate that we are in this situation in the first place.
Yeah, you'd love to have your own place, but circumstances change. So.
What's more is that young buyers tend to be purchasing smaller dwellings like apartments and townhouses rather than traditional freestanding family homes, not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford it. This is a real issue because most financially secure people will tell you their house is their biggest asset. This doesn't just mean it's the asset that they own that's worth the most money either. Owning a house means you don't have rental expenses, and even if you are paying a mortgage, those payments will at least partially be building up equity in the home itself. What's more is that once the mortgage is paid off, you have somewhere to live with very little ongoing costs. Retiring
Can we
with a
pause for a
home
second?
means that even
I don't really agree with the point that like if you buy a townhouse or an apartment, it's not equal to a house. I don't really agree with that at all.
In what sense?
Because it said, most people would say that their house is their most valuable asset. But why wouldn't their apartment be their most valuable asset? I think it's maybe because
Wait, just hold on a second.
Yeah.
What do you mean by house and apartment? Like, I think most people just live in one single place and don't own or rent anything else.
Well, an apartment can like if you buy, you can still buy an apartment. Like let's say I buy an apartment for $500,000 and I buy a house for $500,000. They're both valued at $500,000. The you know I don't see why a house would be worth more.
I
To
think
somebody.
by house they just meant like living place in general. Like, I think
No,
those
no.
I
They
understand.
definitely mean like freestanding house. They said it in the video for sure.
I think it's more like focused on the suburbs than the like city centers where there are huge houses and just small
No,
sub
I meant
apartments.
more like the argument they were making was that it was bad that people were buying more apartments and townhouses in cities rather than freestanding houses in the suburbs or wherever.
I think the problem was more with people buying like smaller houses in the first place, not the big family houses.
Yeah, but size isn't always value. I mean,
Uh,
you can buy an apartment worth the same as a house. So that's where I disagree. Where if the apartment and the house were bought for the same amount of money, it's like a feather and a stone. They're both 1 kilogram. They're both gonna, both as heavy. You know what I'm trying to say?
I mean,
They might look extremely different, but the value is the same.
I think the problem lies with almost every young person who doesn't really have insane riches looks for the same smaller apartment because they are cheaper and they can't afford anything else. So what about the big family houses? When is the price going to crash? People can't really just sell it unless it's, of course, to investors. So and
I
they just gonna rent
think,
it out like multiple levels to different people.
yeah, but I think maybe looking at it a little differently. But I'm just saying that I disagree with the fact that he said that it was bad that people were buying smaller houses or an apartment over like a house in the suburbs, because they have the same value. I bought them for the same price,
Yeah,
so the
but
value isn't different.
just how small can they go on until it becomes a big
No, but I'm
problem?
not looking at size. I'm looking at value. I'm looking at value, not
Yeah,
size.
it's valued at a small house is valued at the same like kind of level relatively as a big family house 2 generations ago. That's for sure. But just how long can
But
this
I just
process continue?
no, but I'm looking at value, and especially this, this world. People don't like people are kind of wanting to live in cities more than in like towns because of how much more there is to do. As young person in the 21st century, I want to be close to clubs, bars, restaurants, theaters, concert halls, cafes, jazz bars, whatever. I don't want to be in a town. So that's why I'm saying that it's not bad to buy something in a city that is smaller or an apartment of the same size as a house because the value is the same.
I don't think they meant in a different like place, but just the size itself. I think they weren't really making a point about
Yeah, but what
living
if
closer
the
or
value is the
further away.
same? Does the size doesn't matter, Noricus?
Yeah, but in the same exact location, a larger house is going to cost more.
Yeah, but
And
the
just,
location isn't the same though. It's a city versus a town.
well, of course, there are a lot of potential houses to buy, but I don't think he meant the location
But he said
itself.
He said freestanding. So and there's no houses that are freestanding in cities. I would say
That's fair.
unless they're in
I,
suburbs.
I don't. I just interpret it as like people really not buying the larger houses no matter where they are. Like even if in smaller towns people would look for the smaller houses first. Like they are even cheaper than the big family houses.
No,
And
but
so
no, because I'm just looking at value. His argument was that it is bad that they're buying apartments and like townhouses because they're smaller or because rather than houses. But I don't see why it is bad because the value is the same. 500,000 in a city, 500,000 in a town. It's the same 500,000. It is not like why is it bad? The world is changing. People want to live in cities. So he
I
said it was bad. I didn't agree with that.
I'm not
Do you
sure.
think that's bad?
As
Do you
I
think that's
said,
bad?
I interpreted it a different way. So let's assume that there is a town and there are two houses for sale in the middle of it, like right next to each other. There is a large house and there is a small house. Like most people would be looking for the smaller house nowadays because they can't afford the larger one.
But is that bad?
Well,
If the value is the
depends.
same?
Like the larger one is probably going to be bought by some investor in that case because nobody else can afford it really.
Yeah, but just look at this one person, same background. I buy the smaller house for this versus the largest house. The value is the same.
I mean, if the value, the perceived value is the same, then that is not really an issue
But even if
because
the value isn't the same, I would still say buying a house is good practice. So again, I just don't agree with the fact that it's bad. I feel like that's such a all-encompassing term. It's just different,
I,
I would say.
I'm not sure why it's exactly bad, but I can kind of imagine that. I'm not even sure where this argument is going, like what he was making now.
I think we're arguing over semantics maybe, but let's
Yeah.
continue with the video and see where it goes.
Modest retirement savings or a pension can go a very long way when compared to someone who will need to stretch those payments to cover rent. If a homeowner is running low on cash in retirement, it could be as simple as downsizing their family home, a luxury not possible for someone who hasn't paid off their home or doesn't own one at all. Now, let's be generous and take this median age of 34 to buy a first home, stick a 30-year mortgage on top of it, and suddenly, even this generous assumption of a regular young worker is in their mid-60s still paying off a home loan. And this is assuming that this person never upgrades their home or renovates or does anything to increase their mortgage from the original one they took out over 30 years. The particularly morbid amongst you might think, well, the boomers have to die and leave us their homes eventually, right? And, well, yeah,
Can we
I
pause real
guess
quick?
so.
I mean, that's also assuming I'm not making more money. I could
That's
pay it
fair.
off sooner if I make more money. So it's a
Yeah,
bit of a
but
flaw.
if you upgrade, then it's the same again, kind of like it's like, do you just not upgrade even though you are making way more money? I guess that's a good idea not to because you have to pay it off first, true.
Yeah, but you still have the asset, so you're not losing at all because the asset is also increasing in value, regardless if I upgrade it or not. And yeah, that upgrade might be a one-time cost, but the house itself is still making money. So yeah, I just wonder why they're not introducing the fact that, you know,
But
I could pay it off faster or earn more money.
if you're still a mortgage, won't upgrading like be way more complicated than just owning
What do you
and
mean by
swapping?
upgrading?
Like if you are paying mortgage for a house and you want to move somewhere else,
Yeah.
like what exactly happens then? Like, do you just pay more mortgage or?
If you leave the premises, I mean, let's say I buy a house, I've never lived in it, the price of my mortgage isn't dependent on if I live there or not.
No, but
That is
like
not a factor
obviously
calculated
you
in.
don't want to pay two mortgages at the same time, so you're looking to swap or.
No, if you can, why not? Why?
That's,
Yeah, if you can.
that's true.
Because you could rent it out, right? Let's say I bought a second house. I have two mortgages. You could rent it out, cover. Usually, your renter will probably cover the mortgage, if not give you more money than the mortgage and all the utilities cost. So that mortgage you can immediately like write off that mortgage as being paid because you're renting it out, and then you're set with just your second mortgage if you bought a second house.
I mean that I don't think that's that simple because then everyone would just take a mortgage and like take a mortgage for a house and just rent it out to somebody, like even without having the need to
Well,
live
that's
somewhere.
the main.
That's
Well,
basically
actually,
investing it.
well, it is actually that easy. The issue is having a bank that's going to give you the money, having assets, enough assets, that a bank, you know, is going to give you the loan. And the third is, wanting to do it. It's not easy owning multiple houses, having multiple people living in them, dealing with multiple issues.
Yeah, it
Drain
is.
pipe breaks, bathroom breaks. I have to fix this. I have to fix that. It's a job. It's called, a realtor. Whole companies, do that. So it's definitely it is that's the thing about a lot of this. It is actually that easy. The only thing you need is money, but that's a very big hurdle that a lot of people need to get over. That need to reach a certain point.
So it's eventually essentially just taking a second job in a way. But then why will you go through all this complicated
yeah.
stuff? Why not just work somewhere else as a second job at that point?
Because it makes you a lot of money.
I mean, if you manage to pay off the mortgage, then you own two homes, but what then? Will you be like
And then
50,
you do a
60?
third, and then you do a fourth, and then you do a fifth, sixth, seventh. Again, I'm telling you, your first one's going to be the hardest. Your second one's going to be a little easier. Third, a little easier. And by the time you have 20 homes, you know. But then again, that's you're taking a lot of risk. You're taking a lot of debt because you're probably using your first house to pay off your second house, right? Or to show the bank, look, I have one house. You know, I have this job, um, so I can pay off the second house. But you're not. Let's say both houses are worth 2 million, right? That's 2 million of in debt, depending on how much you've paid off, that you're taking onto yourself. So a lot of times, you know, you won't buy a house until you have maybe enough to cover half the cost of the house. So you have some fallback. That's why a housing market crash is so dangerous, right? So there's a lot of variables that go into it. But that's how a lot of these, you know, realtors, real estate companies, that's how they operate. You know, they own many properties, they rent them out, they sell them, and they buy more, and they just continue to grow like that.
So again, basically not knowing something makes you miss out on money in a way.
Exactly. But yeah, the things I kind of found interesting. You said, is it really that easy? It really is sometimes,
Uh,
but there's a huge hurdle,
there's-
and it's called having enough money to do it.
I mean, I guess it's easy to make the decision, but what comes with it, managing it and so on is not that easy.
But
It-
sometimes you don't. You just give it to a company. You're like, I don't want to rent this house, but I don't have time to deal with it.
But
Like,
then,
okay,
are you still
we'll take
making more money than the mortgage?
100%, for sure,
Uh,
for sure.
Again, I'm not familiar with prices, so I can't really elaborate on that, but
And if not, let's say you're like, oh man, I'm gonna have to take a hit. You know, maybe I'm gonna have to pay 10% on top of what I'm getting just to pay off the mortgage. But that's instead of 100%, you're just paying 10% on the first house. So you're paying a lot less. And to be honest, if you're buying a second house with a mortgage and you have to pay that off, and you're, you know, renting out your first house through a company or whatever, and you're not able to pay off both mortgages, then you're doing a bad financial mistake, and you probably shouldn't have bought the second house to begin with. So
yeah, that's
you know,
like
there's the risk, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions like that.
just
But
the
yeah,
decision to upgrade something could be very, very foolish. Like upgrading a car or a house when you still haven't paid it off, and just because you got a better job, you might just lose it the next day, or like you can
but
never
again,
know.
that's that's a risk you don't have to take it, but it's a risk you're taking. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
that's money management.
Pleasant as that may be, it is a reality. The problem though is that this will likely only exacerbate the issue. We saw this in our video on why family fortunes disappear. Inheritances that could actually fund a retirement tend to go to people that are already pretty old and wealthy themselves. Now, again, the unaffordable housing issue is a debate as old as modern capitalism, but maybe this isn't an issue anyway. Maybe you are still unconcerned because you have plans to fund your retirement even without a house to call your own. Well, okay, let's put those plans to the test. The stock market is the other major vehicle by which people fund their retirement. Even fixed income pensions ultimately rely on the growth of these markets to provide incomes to their members in retirement. But this assumption of endless returns may be under threat. To understand why, let's consider a simple example. 10 lumberjacks are working at a sawmill that creates frames for residential homes. At the moment, the lumberjacks are only using basic hand tools, but if they all work hard and nobody slacks off, they will meet their quotas. One particularly astute lumberjack takes a portion of his paycheck and over time uses it to fund research into motorized tools. His money was well spent because he eventually invents the table saw. He then saves up a bit more of his money to buy the materials needed to build 9 copies of his new contraption. He then gives these 9 table saws to his colleagues who had previously been using those hand tools. This boosts their productivity enough that they can still meet their quota even if the first lumberjack doesn't show up to work at all. This is what we call capital investment, and it's how, at least in theory, we can sustainably fund people's retirements. The same amount of frames are made, the other 9 lumberjacks don't need to work longer and harder, and the first lumberjack has been properly rewarded for his creation with a nice cushy retirement. Of course, this is a very crude example, but in reality, most people do the same thing just through the medium of the stock market. Companies raise money through an IPO or an add-on offering and then use that money to purchase capital equipment, which will allow their workers to effectively and efficiently produce goods and services for the economy. But let's go back to our oversimplified example. problems start to arise when more of these lumberjacks get the same bright idea. One might invest into a forklift to make the work of 9 men possible with just 8. And then another might do the same with nail guns to make the work of the remaining 8 possible with just 7, and so on and so on. But every time this happens, it gets a fair bit harder to find that next thing. Eventually, you are going to need an almost fully automated production line, and even then, you are probably going to want at least one worker to oversee this operation. Every human you take out of the equation and replace with a piece of capital becomes more and more expensive, especially when compared to some other alternative investments. Let's say Lumberjack 5 will need to invest millions of dollars into a robotic arm in order to effectively retire while still ensuring the quota of the lumber mill is met. He might just say, "Fuck it. What I'll do instead is just buy a factory and require the remaining 4 workers to work an extra 10 hours a week to pick up my slack while I go and retire." Now, this guy sounds like an asshole, but just think. How many hours a week are you working in your job to just cover rent? This investment into non-productive assets, as in assets that don't actually assist in adding value, is a major hurdle. Now, the classic example of a non-productive asset is something like gold, bitcoins, Pokemon cards, and of course, real estate. Now, real estate is weird because, unlike these other non-productive assets, it does produce income without needing to be sold, and it does this through rent. Investing into real estate has been a particularly attractive investment for a lot of people, which does 2 things. It increases the price of real estate, causing more of this issue we saw in the first part of this video, but it takes away from investments into the types of productive assets that can sustainably fund retirements. There is one other problem beyond this as well: the overinflation of all asset markets.
Maybe he'll explain it later in the video, but I don't really explain the fact that what does he about target? What does he mean by non-productive? How is owning an asset like a house or gold, which may or may not increase in value, not produce enough to retire on? I don't understand that analogy at all, actually.
I don't think it's focused on the person itself who owns the product itself, but just in general, the entire economy. Like, lending gold doesn't really add or create any extra value as like, let's say, making a product like the lumberjacks do. Actually, it's still lend thing in a way if you lend it to a bank, but it doesn't really do anything. It just swaps places. I don't know how to put it.
But value is added though. Just because it's not produced or something isn't made out of it's not it's not a source of production or there's no value added due to labor or skill or anything like that. Doesn't mean there's no added value that isn't productive to. Let's say my whole economy is my house, right? It's $10,000. My neighbor, his whole economy is sawing lumber. It's also worth $10,000. In 10 years, my house is worth $15,000, and he's found a way to increase his production, right, through table saw, whatever, nail gun, and his production is now worth $15,000. What's different? What's different about that? Just because he worked and used tools and performed production and used labor, my asset and his, materials or resources that he turned into an asset, they're the same value. So I find the analogy a little weird.
I think he mentioned that houses and real estate is especially weird because technically it does produce value because people live in it, use it, and so on. But like if you are sitting on a 10k gold bar and it increases to like 15k, for example, in 10 years, then what exactly happened in the big picture? Like it was
$5,000 is added to the value.
I mean, no, in the big picture, like not just for you or for your neighbor, but for the entire world's economy. Like nothing changed. It's just more scarce.
My gold bar is now worth $15,000, and everyone else's gold bar is also worth $5,000 more related to that 1 kilo. So maybe it's due to like he considers, maybe he considers it something that doesn't outpace inflation. So the value might not be the same. But if there's a couple things that outpace inflation, it's definitely stock markets and houses. So I find it weird. We can continue the video, but
yeah, let's see what he says about stock markets then.
Yeah, I find.
But I guess let's just rewind a bit because
Requirements. There is one other problem beyond this as well: the overinflation of all asset markets. Let's take a
There we
look
go.
at our original example of those table saws. They were machines that made cut up pieces of wood. Let's say they chop up 20 pieces each a day. Now, let's replace those table saws with shares. These are effectively machines for making money in the form of dividends. Let's say each share makes $20 a day. In both examples, the lumberjack would need to own 9 of each to be able to fund their retirement. 180 pieces of wood would replace their job at the lumber mill, and $180 a day would replace their income, so either works just fine. Now, counterintuitively, problems arise when those assets become more expensive. Most people think stocks getting more expensive is a good thing, and it is for the people that already own them. Imagine each share was trading for $10,000. Saving up $90,000 is a pretty tall order for a lumberjack on $180 per day, but it is certainly possible over a working career. Now, imagine those same shares were trading for $100,000 while still paying the same $20 daily dividend. If you already own those shares, you would be feeling great, because your on-paper net worth has grown handsomely. But our lumberjack now has to buy $900,000 worth of shares to fund his retirement, which is just not realistically possible within his working career. Now, this might sound like a far-fetched example, but it isn't. It's exactly what's happening today. To see this, let's look at the price-to-earnings ratio of the S&P 500, a collection of the 500 largest public companies in America. Historically, it has hovered around a multiple of 15. This means that on average, the stock price is 15 times the company's net income. Today, that multiple is sitting just around 50, which is the second highest it's ever been in history, falling only behind late 2008, which, as you all know, was a time of widespread economic prosperity. In plain English, this means that people are going to either need to invest 3 times as much to fund their retirement, or rely on the next biggest idiot to buy their shares off them in retirement for 100 times PE multiple, 200 times multiple, 1,000 times multiple, which, by the way, certain investors are already doing for some stocks. Now, you might say, oh, well, shares aren't like table saws with fixed outputs. These dividends can and likely will increase in the future, right? And sure, that's almost guaranteed. But it's still unlikely that we will ever see widespread PE ratios under 20 again for 2 reasons. First, if a company does start paying out consistently high dividends relative to its market price, well then investors will buy it, which will push up the price, meaning that it won't be a great deal anymore. Market forces are a bitch. The second reason is a bit more
Maybe
complex.
pause here again. I feel like that's assuming there's there might be new companies and I don't know. It's kind of hard to say that because, with the stock market value increasing, their initial value might also increase. But I feel like that's always in line with, not always in line, but usually in line with inflation. And so usually your most middle class jobs uh, are in line with inflation usually, uh, or just below or above, whatever. Um, so I feel like I don't know, there will always be other opportunities, you know. Always a new Tesla or a new Facebook that you could
Yeah,
invest
but
in.
I think Tesla is an outlier and so is Facebook, because if you invest
Yeah, of
in
course,
a
there's always these,
startup, then there's a very, very
but
high chance, risk that it doesn't take off and it just wastes
yeah,
all
but
your
there's
money.
thousands of companies, and if there's one thing the stock market always does, and the only true thing about the stock market is always goes up. It can come down, it can be down for 40 years, but it'll always go back up.
I mean, I don't
Um,
think 40 years is a very
Yeah, it
healthy
won't go
time to
down at 40 yet,
wait.
but like two, it might be down for two. Like people who, the reason why 2008 was so bad because assets lost extreme value. So everything that you owned in that moment lost extreme value. So you either had to sell off at 10 cents to the dollar, meaning that you lost like 90% of that asset's value. Um, like, and so you couldn't pay things off, and so some people lost everything because they had to sell everything, or they couldn't afford to pay their bills. But like, if you could afford to hold on to that asset, right, because you had cash laying around, or you had other assets making money, or your job wasn't affected by the crash, you could keep it, and in 2 years it'd be worth the same, if not more, than what it did before the crash. So it's not
I mean,
that's
I
why I
don't.
always you always want to
Mhm.
invest with things you can afford to lose, right?
Yeah, but I think his point is
Or
is
something you
more
don't need to
about
lose.
that for every dollar you invest, you receive less and less dividends as this rate goes up. So as time
That's not
passes,
true
it's
because
gonna
dividends
be.
will increase. Dividends will go up with it.
His
Otherwise, it will.
his point is that dividends won't keep up with the price increase as much. Like there is a. He was
No, no, no,
talking about.
no. That's not what he said.
I mean, wait, he.
It would increase with values would increase would increase with company value.
Yeah, but
That's
wasn't
how
his
dividends work.
point is that the entry price increases way faster than the
Yeah, the
dividend
entry price
price?
will increase, but that's assuming that everything stays the same.
So
It's
if
like the same thing with like his housing thing. It's assuming that at my job, I'm never getting a promotion. I'm never getting an increase in income.
so
So I'm
let's
gonna have to. So I feel like it's very doomer gloomer, like very
it's
simplistic.
uh,
It's assuming my value A will always stay the same, so my outcome B will always be the same. It's like EU4, right? It's like my income in 4044 will always be the same. No, it's gonna increase. You're gonna do things that increase value. So that doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, of course, investing is great. Like if you can afford it, then absolutely do it. But I think his point was that if you have 10k to invest and you invest, you may be receiving like $100 dividends for now, but in 10 years, if you invest the equivalent of 10k now, then whatever it is, then uh, of course accounting to the inflation, then you would not be receiving that much dividends, like maybe I don't know, fifty
Yeah, but
dollars
that's
of today's
but
value.
but that's assuming that like the only thing that matters in the stock market is dividends, right? There's so many ways to make money in the stock market. One of the ways is dividend investing, but there's also buying puts, buying checks, buying you know, man, like buying all these different versions of stocks, buying a new stock that may increase in value, may lose value,
Yeah,
by
like
betting against the market, but betting
mm,
against the company, um, by shorting, basically like
but
it doesn't mean that dividend's the only way.
the more safe way to make money is the less money is gonna make. So there's always some risk involved.
But that's always been true. Like you invest with it's like with many banks will be like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much risk do you want to take? 5 being the riskiest, 1 being the 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 least risk, and so 1 being like ETFs, right? Where you put in $1,000 and or and you may receive 1% of that value plus in 10 years, or you're taking high risk, high reward type things that might give you 10% in a year per year for 10 years. But you might risk losing more, etc. But again, you only really want to invest with money that you can afford to lose and that you're not going to need, and that you don't have to look into it. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm explaining it badly, but I just feel like it's a simplistic view on a very complicated issue. Uh,
Well,
yeah,
of course he's going to simplify it for a YouTube video, but yeah, it's just
yeah.
out of the scope of this video to discuss it in detail,
But again, it's like
unfortunately.
assuming like A stays the same, so my destination is going to stay the same. Like things change, so I feel like that change isn't being taken into account here. But
Well,
we can see.
let's see what he says about it.
Yeah.
Complicated, but it's one that has some leading economists genuinely concerned. Robert J. Gordon is an American economist who published this paper with the National Bureau of Economic Research. Is the US economy growth over? Faltering innovation confronts the 6 headwinds. It's a fantastic paper that is surprisingly readable even to people without a strong economic background. But spoiler alert, Gordon basically argues that the past 200 years of innovation and economic growth were more of an exception rather than the rule that we should expect to continue indefinitely into the future. Limitless growth in a finite world? You do the maths. Gordon basically argues that this generation is the 5th lumberjack. All the easy innovations that drastically improve productivity have already been made, and even gradual improvements from here on out will either be very expensive or just rent-seeking in nature, working
I'll
more
agree.
to shift value.
I do think there's other ways to find value though. So like maybe in 10,000, like let's say you invested $10,000 today, right? And you'll make $15,000 in 10 years. Well, maybe in 10 years there's something else that I can invest my $10,000 in. Let's say like a fucking VR world where people, have fake real estate or something else like that, and that'll get me my $15,000. So I feel like with the internet, with it's almost infinite possibilities. Whatever someone can make up can exist. I feel like that kind of there are finite resources, but I think like especially now with like electronics and virtual spaces, I think there is almost infinite resources when it comes to that. So I think we'll find a lot more value, um, less in physical things, but more in virtual. And we're seeing that now with NFTs, right? We're seeing that with like cryptocurrencies. Um, like if you had to make what's the supply of Bitcoin? Like 21 million. If you need to physically make those 21 million Bitcoin, yeah, that'd be pretty difficult. But you can just write code out of nothing and create that value, um, and store it somewhere. And I guess that takes physical resources, but its value, um, like what it takes to store those Bitcoin is far less. Like the value of that is far less than the actual value of Bitcoin, right? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like the
Yeah, but
servers, let's say the servers cost $1 million to keep and maintain Bitcoin, but Bitcoin value is like $1 trillion or something like that. So the value of storing that Bitcoin in its physical environment is maybe $1 million and finite, but the value of that Bitcoin is infinite, almost, depending on what people want to give for it. So I feel like there's other ways to make that 10,000 later on, is what I'm trying to say. Like there's different so I agree with him that like if he's basing the entire economy on maybe modern structures like the Wall Street or whatever, that could work, or the real estate market or whatever. But I think there's always going to be new ways to make money, right? Like cryptocurrencies didn't exist 20 years ago, and if you introduce, people were like, man, there's no way to find new ways to invest, or things are running out, and that's just not the case anymore, I don't think. So maybe that's where I would disagree with the video.
yeah, it's interesting how just making up more ways to like collect more made-up money in a way, but of course it's real because algorithmic. Actually, I had a crypto class this semester, and we kind of did talk about blockchain and stuff, but I don't know, it just feels weird to me that we just keep making up more and more value. But of course, that's what paper money is in the first place, just debt in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
So I feel like there
as,
are infinite possibilities almost.
I mean, as long as there is some sort of physical limitation, like electricity, for example, or storing it, then there is a hard
Yeah.
limit. Of course, we can just keep expanding it, like with asteroid mining, for example. That could be a thing in the future.
Yeah.
I would
And
invest in
like
it, to be fair.
as long as people want to give it value, it'll have value. So I think that's where kind of the scope of the video doesn't really make
Yeah, I
sense. But
think we
I mean
are arguing over the innovation part. Like, can you just keep making up more and more new things? That's
I would say yes, but yeah. But that might be maybe for a different video. But yeah,
yeah,
I
that
would I
that
would say
part of it is the main issue that we have, I think.
hmm
But can we keep this up or not? Because if not, then it's gonna recede and just plummet.
I would say yes, but we'll see.
Around in new and creative ways, more so than actually working to create any. If this rather bleak outlook wasn't good enough, Gordon argued that this would coincide with what he described as the 6 economic headwinds. These are forces that will act to slow growth in economies around the world for at least the next 100 years. These headwinds are the loss of the demographic dividend. Basically, the economy saw a huge boost when women started to move into the workforce between the 1960s and the 1990s. Now, most women in developed countries work a professional career similar to their male counterparts, but that's just the status quo now. We aren't ever going to be able to double the workforce again unless, well, we make people work later and later in their lives. The second headwind is the loss.
Well, technically, automation can solve that, although my personal opinion on automation is that we have to handle it very, very carefully, and it could go wrong very easily. Like, of
I just think there's always going to be new jobs.
yeah, but
And
he's
different ways to
talking
make
about
money.
demographic, not job opportunities itself. Like,
But I also
workforce.
don't think that is ended, right? So in the Western world, in the developed world, yeah, but in like regions of Africa and Asia, there's still many more women, um, to be empowered and to become uh, business women. So I don't know. I feel like that hasn't ended yet. That wave of introducing new people who before may not have had the resources or the education or the expertise to do something, or the opportunities, sorry, to do something. That's still happening, right? Maybe Western women have had that opportunity now since the 60s and 90s, but there's
Yeah.
still people in Africa who, men and women, who haven't had that opportunity. So I think that wave, that demographic dividend, still hasn't stopped. And the guy who made the paper considered it done, which I don't agree with.
Yeah,
I assume that's still going on.
it's not like completely done, and I think I heard it somewhere else that Africa is going to become a huge powerhouse in like 50
Yeah,
to 100
it's
years. Like there are a lot of people living there with like right now with pretty bad conditions and opportunities, but once it modernizes, then oh boy.
I mean, look
But
at Nigeria. Nigeria's one of the most modern countries in Africa. With a large middle class, and the opportunities there. There's almost a Silicon Valley there as well, and huge opportunities for investment, and natural resources and stuff like that are still untapped in the entire region. So Africa is 100% going to become a world player on the financial markets. So
well, that is if global warming doesn't just ruin it completely.
maybe that's for everyone.
Yeah, but
So
yeah, this argument is not necessarily complete yet on his part because yeah, there are a lot of people to be introduced into the working environment. But
exactly.
I think automation is going to take over eventually, and when
True,
it
but
does,
but there's also jobs that it doesn't affect, and there's always new types of jobs coming into the market. Like, space might become a huge thing, and we're gonna need hundreds of thousands, millions of people to work there.
I mean,
Um,
people
you
will
know,
be probably in like a supervising position or like some kind of creative position if
yeah,
automation can
or
take care of everything else. But then again, there is this very scary trend I've been reading somewhere that like 100 years ago. Wait, let me just collect my thoughts for a second. So,
Mhm.
100 years ago, there was a certain output. And of course, since then, there were innovations and inventions which increased this output. But surprisingly, people are not working less or they are not being paid way more. Like, it's just this scary trend is going on that even though we are being very, very efficient right now and becoming even more efficient in the future, we are not really seeing the rewards of it as like the working class.
I think that's more of an ethical problem, and like the nature of capitalism, that a lot of the money is being hoarded by the few.
Yeah, this is
Um,
why automation is very, very scary.
yeah, and it'll put more power in those with money.
Like if we don't handle it
Um,
correctly, like don't just I
I
guess
mean, there's still gonna. I think there's definitely a change coming, because the many outweigh the few, even if the few have money.
well
You know.
for now depends. If they can just make up a robotic army, then what's
Yeah.
that to stop them?
Yeah, I think
and
that's very gloom. But someone has to make the robots, and maybe you can have robots to make other robots, but someone has to. I don't know. I think you need to control an enormous amount of the world, in order to make that happen.
well, you
Right? You
don't have
need.
to do it alone. You can just do it as a class. But
Yeah, I guess. But again, I think
I,
the many still outweigh the few. It's very, I think it would be very easy to, and however much you may hate the government, um, I still think they would have put a stop to that, or certain governments. Like I think in Europe, the European Union would probably do quite a good job.
mm,
Hopefully, my glass half full mind. Hopefully, they would protect us from that situation like that.
I just really hope that it's going to be handled correctly. Like because if it goes wrong
We'll
and it
see.
can go wrong so easily, then it's gonna be disaster. But
We'll
for
see.
certain people, yeah.
I mean, militaries are still mostly humans, right?
Well,
So I would assume that people with the power like that would
you could
want
just
to
hire
keep the power with them.
mercenaries.
Yeah, but I mean, again, how much can you keep doing that? So
Well, with
and how
automation, almost endless. Like you control the supplies of everything. Mm,
yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think it would work that way. I I think that's like the worst scenario. A lot of things would have to go right for those people
I mean,
for that to happen.
it's in their interest to go that way, so they will do everything to
Yeah, but
make that happen.
you can plan as much as you want, but there will always be things that change. So Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again,
Yeah.
that's the worst scenario. But
Yeah,
I
but
hope
the point is that this first argument is not really necessarily true because, well, first of all, there are way more people who are not really up to date and like on par with the output that they could be making, and automation is gonna happen eventually.
exactly.
What about the second? Let's see.
In educational attainment, particularly in the USA.
That's true.
Education is becoming more expensive, less comprehensive, and increasingly irrelevant to the requirements of the modern workforce. A 3-year degree simply does not mean as much as it did 50 years ago, not to an individual or the economy as a whole. The third headwind is rising inequality, a touchy subject at the best times, but Gordon was surprisingly pragmatic about his approach to this issue. The paper noted that incomes were, on average, increasing by around 1.3% per year, but that growth was heavily focused on the top 1%. The remaining 99% only saw income growth of around 0.75% year over year, not even enough to keep up with inflation. That means that if this trend continues, it will be inevitable that larger and larger pools of workers simply won't have the financial means to save for retirement. However, if you are in the top 1%, you can say, nah, your video title is wrong in the comment section below. The fifth headwind is energy and the environment. The growth of the past.
Did he just skip over the fourth?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, I would be interested to hear about that more, but yeah, that would probably be relating to the Africa thing.
I feel like the maker of this video always assumes that things will just stay the same. Like, assuming things stay the way they are, but like things never stay the way they are.
Well, that's the easiest to predict.
Yeah, but like I mean, like in the suffragette movement, right? When women had almost no rights, they weren't allowed to work, or they were allowed to work the worst jobs or the most menial jobs, or etc. They weren't allowed to do many things. Like that changed, right? But I think if you would, ask people during that time, like, you think this is going to change it? They probably like no. Like I think or if you ask men, you probably be like, no, I like the way things are now. So. Yeah, things are gonna change. They always do. Especially in the United States. I think that's a country waiting for change to happen.
Absolutely. But
with everything going on. So
if anything, the ruling elite kind of learned from the past mistakes as well, and
yeah, but that's assuming that all people who are rich are evil. There's plenty of people who have billions who do a lot of philanthropy, who give it all away.
Well, but depends on how rich.
So, there's billionaires who give billions away every year, and who
does that make them a good person though?
I mean, like, again, you'd have to be like, maybe there's maybe like a couple billionaires that I would think that would attempt to do the automation thing and become like evil supervillains. I don't think this, I think this, for as many as there are like that, there's also the same amount of billionaires or millionaires with a lot of money who want to do the good thing.
I think they would be
solar energy.
They would be just indifferent to it. Like, they are not necessarily evil, but like just keeping it that way.
I think there's plenty of people who are fighting for a better world.
Some of them are, yeah, but it's just a very scary future. Like, just to see these two different sides. I guess there will eventually be kind of a cut off somewhere, but and let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Century was driven by fossil fuels, a cheap, easily transportable, incredibly efficient source of energy that could power everything from automobiles to jetliners. But of course, they are a finite resource that have come at a cost. This cost will now be paid by younger and younger generations, either in the form of environmental regulations that slow down industrial output, or from complete environmental collapse that will also slow down production. The final headwind is debt. Household debt, government debt, corporate...
Yeah, I think there will be, like, if we are talking about the environment, there will be other sources, like asteroid mining, for example.
I agree with the fact that there was a cost for using fossil fuels, 100%.
Yeah,
but the fact that will automatically lead to a decrease in production, why? Can't electricity, like solar and wind power and nuclear power, take over from that? Why not?
First of all, we should
assuming that it doesn't.
We should be really hurrying up with that takeover, and second of all, like, just producing that much, like, for example, solar panels. I did watch a video about just putting solar panels in the Sahara, and Solar panels are a good thing, but they are not even 100% efficient either, because most of the stuff that they produce is heat, not electricity. Like 80% of the sunlight
No,
caught
but that
by
no, no,
them.
but that heat is what creates electricity. And a lot of these
Mm,
solar powers, so one, right, they um
I mean, they
they
are.
create heat like you said, right? And the others they charge cells. But that heat, a lot of these efficient solar powers also heat up water in these solar panels. That water creates steam. Steam spins a turbine. Turbine creates electricity.
Yeah, that's
So
how it works. Yeah, but those
yeah,
are the thermal plants, thermal power plants, I think. Yeah. Or
yeah, but there's a
yeah.
lot of these like all-in-one type of solar with like these water steam
I
things.
mean, you can pipeline it in a way, but even then, like, of course, it's better than coal. That's why we are pushing it, but still, it's not completely like environment impact free.
Yeah, no, but it's far less, and there's a certain like the point where with fossil fuels is that there's only so much that the Earth can recycle, but with total like solar panel output and wind power and making those windmills and solar panels, that amount that the Earth can recycle and the amount that producing those things at a certain point um will allow us to get below that point where the Earth can recycle what we are outputting, um, which is the hope at least. Um, so yeah, I disagree with the fact that that will automatically lead to a loss in production because that's assuming nothing can substitute
Well,
that.
if anything, either regulations or just like the inability to do the same thing because the environment changed so much is going to be a limiting factor.
True, but hopefully innovation
Yeah,
can
that's
help them.
we are kind of hoping for a miracle at this point.
Yeah,
But yeah,
they happen.
let's not get that doomer.
Down production. The final headwind is debt. Household debt, government debt, corporate debt, it's all been growing steadily over the years, and eventually this needs to be paid back. This is ultimately going to result in the requirement for more income or less spending. For the government, producing more income is easy, they just tax more. But for individuals and businesses, the only option they might have is spending less. If someone is already running on a tight budget, then those regular contributions to a retirement account might be what ends up getting sacrificed. Gordon did present a likely outcome to alleviate this issue for all parties, and you might be able to guess what it is. Yup, push back the retirement ages. Now, if this has all been bleak for you and you still think that you're going to make millions overnight, then good for you. I will have to work harder at crushing your spirit the next time. But until then, you should learn on what to do with your overnight fortune by watching our video on exactly what to do if you suddenly make a lot of money.
Yeah, so there's quite a few elements actually in that video that I disagree with. But again, he has to keep it simple,
Yeah,
and if you keep changing the variables,
Mhm.
then your video is going to keep changing, and it's going to be hours long. So, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically there is hope still in the future, but we kind of have to be clever and quick about it.
Yeah. And again, the video also assumed that things stay the way they are, and that's just not going to be the case. So, and
I mean,
20 years ago, and it was the ozone layer, and if the ozone layer wasn't fixed, we'll all die. Now it's global warming, and if it's not fixed, we'll all die. Again, the ozone was probably an easier solution to
yeah,
fix than
it's
global
basically
warming,
the
but
lumberjack issue again.
yeah. But
Mhm.
gotta hope for innovation, and there's always gonna be maybe with the current technology, there's no way to fix it, and in 10 years we're gonna find something that makes it incredibly easy to fix it, and we're gonna be like, oh my god, why were we worrying about it for so long?
I
Uh,
think that is a way more complex issue though than the ozone layer.
yeah, but at that time, it was an extremely complex issue with the technology they
Mm.
had at the time. So again, that's assuming nothing changes, and change is constant, and it always happens, no matter if you want it or not. So, uh, yeah. Damn, we did two
Yeah,
videos, 2 hours.
yeah, it's like I've expected way less time for this, but I mean,
Yeah.
do we go into the EVE Online videos or maybe
What's
another
the third one?
time?
$1 million video game battles. What's the fourth one?
Uh, Self-imposed
Recessionary
economic
mortgage.
collapse.
I mean, 3 and 4 are kind of the same. It can
Yeah,
maybe
it's
just, and the fifth one is which one? The rise of bullshit jobs. Well, let's go with the Eve Online thing. Cause actually, I did
mhm.
have an opinion about that one.
All right.
Um,
Well, let's
and
let's
and
go with
let's see.
those then. I think we can
Maybe
just
how long is this one? Like 9 minutes
9 minutes and 9 minutes or 10 minutes
let's go with the
basically.
first one. Yeah, we'll see.
This is EVE Online. a massively multiplayer online spaceship game, which is
Could you full
probably
screen this
best known
Thank you.
for two things: making headlines about its massive in-game conflicts involving tens of thousands of players, and its incredibly realistic in-game financial system, which can make losing a virtual spaceship just as consequential as losing a phone or a car in the real world. Countless magazines and even much more successful YouTube channels have talked about these two factors individually, but where I think they get really interesting is where they merge together.
I think, like, I was actually thinking about playing EVE Online once, and I figured that what I would end up doing as a player would just collecting resources and not really amounting to much. Like, I was just feeling like a working class person if I were to start the game instead of like EVE Online seems like a spaceship game where you shoot other spaceships and everything else, but instead it's basically a reality simulator in a way. Like you have to network and control
mean,
stuff.
It's 100% a reflection of the modern day way that we make money. Large groups of people pay for a small amount of organizations to commit one or two wars. Basically, it's like millions of workers give the generals, in this case, the people who are captaining the ships or whatever, the ability to fight in space wars. It's like how Amazon workers allowed Jeff Bezos to go to space.
Yeah, but just as I wouldn't work for Amazon, I wouldn't play EVE just for that. I would rather just get a real life job instead. That's the issue.
I guess there's a certain probably some enjoyment in because it's a game, I guess, and some people like number games. Like we like E4, and people would be like, "Why do you like that? It's literally a spreadsheet with land painting." And we have to explain to them there's other ways.
Yeah, but in EU4 you get to command an entire country, and in EVE Online you may just be collecting resources with your spaceship and you be a worker.
That might be enough for them. Or they're saying, like, for us we're seeing it simplistic, like, bro, you're just collecting resources and
like
captaining a ship. Like, how is that similar to running a country in EU4? But the thing is, for them, they're probably like, dude, this guy doesn't understand how in depth it is, right? So it's kind of two coins.
I don't know. I just don't see myself digging deep into the game to enjoy it. That's why I didn't even start it.
Yeah, but that's like a personal opinion based, But I would say it very much reflects like the real world situation, right?
Of course it does, yeah.
That's
why we are watching a video on it.
Yeah, a number of organizations and guilds own billions of dollars of assets that are mined by many workers and soldiers, whatever. A lot of the money in the hands of the few. So yeah, basically. And it's kind of interesting, right? You would assume that like they would want like this utopia, like everyone has fun, everyone owns like the same amount a little bit, right? I mean, everyone has a ship.
For people to play a video game, they have to have a certain degree of fun at least, but otherwise they wouldn't be playing it, right?
Yeah, I know, but I meant it more as in like, what would you assume is like the perfect world, right? Everyone has enough money to live, everyone has a house, everyone has a car, everyone can go on trips, everyone can, that's, maybe kind of the perfect world. There's probably people, it deviates what people consider the perfect world, but that's like almost the median, the thing. But like Eve doesn't do that. It reflects the real world because you would think, okay, everyone has a ship.
In a way it does. You still want to have fun in life and in Eve as well.
Yeah, but I mean it more as in like you would then think that reflects in Eve, right? If it would be perfect, everyone would have their
spaceship to ride to war.
Everyone would have their spaceship. Everyone would war. Everyone would travel or would visit new things. But that's not the case, right? If you really want to do your thing, like it is in the real world, right? You need to pool your assets. You need to maybe work for somebody else to get started. And so instead of reflecting this like perfect world, it just reflects the real world because that's what we know. And that's what kind of will maybe be the most effective thing. So that is kind of interesting to note that's kind of what people are doing now because I don't know, maybe it's the most effective way to commit war, which maybe capitalism is.
That is the meta basically.
Make money to finance your army, yeah.
But then why would I play something that reflects real life so well instead of just playing a fantasy game?
Why do we play E4 that reflects history?
It's kind of like a power tripping fantasy because technically you are the ruler, not even the king, but just an invisible entity over the country.
I
and
mean,
you get to
you
be
are
the
the
main.
ruler, but
You get to be a main character.
yeah, basically, you get to live the story of your that you want. But you might, but also you might just be a soldier in this organization, and that might be good enough for you. You
Yeah,
get to
like
shoot a cannon every now and again.
EU4, yeah, that's fair. But EU4 wouldn't be fun if you were playing as a single regiment. Just
Yeah,
yeah,
but I just thought you can't compare the two games. But I
yeah.
think the analogy about like the money thing kind of this works. But
Yeah,
but yeah,
Spaceship set 21,000 years in the future, Eve is surprisingly realistic. And that realism extends to these massive wars in the sense that they are expensive. The in-game currency called ISK has an approximate exchange rate of $6 per billion in-game ISK. Although it must be mentioned that trading this in-game currency directly back and forth for real-life money is actually against the rules of the game, for now at least, and will get you banned. Even still, this shows that in-game assets have a very tangible real-world value on the gray market. So, when you see headlines about trillions of ISK being lost in one of these epic battles, it gives you an idea of just how expensive it can be to wage entire wars in EVE Online. But this all begs a question. Who or what funds these wars? With a price tag of hundreds of thousands of real-world dollars and nothing but virtual space pride in return, it doesn't sound like a very good deal, right? Well, it's time to learn how space money works, and if you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing for new videos like this one made every week. Okay, so there are 3 interesting and unique ways that major wars have been funded over the past 2 decades that this game has existed, but let's start with the most basic one. This game is home to a selection of mega corporations that are run entirely by players, similar in many ways to guilds in World of Warcraft, only on a much larger scale. Now, the largest of these corporations effectively run like nation states. They have defined borders, a standing military, taxation, industry, and of course, command structures. These large institutions will inevitably butt heads with other similar entities over resources, territory, or, just for fun. At the end of the day, it is a video game, so the reasons to go to war can simply be to entertain the members of these corporations. Now, what will
To be fair, I don't think that's related to the video games, but
yeah, basically.
normally happen is that these individual participants in these wars need to provide their own combat ships, funded out of the money they make in the game themselves. But if these ships are lost in battle, the mega corporations will pay to replace them. They do this because ultimately they will need manpower to win these wars. Ensuring that people aren't too afraid of losing their ships means that their players will keep logging in and YOLOing into these devastating space battles. Now, these ship replacement programs, or SRP, will often be funded by the taxes collected from these corporations during times of relative peace. The industrialists get given a safe and secure piece of territory to conduct their business, and in return, they need to pay a portion of their profits to a central authority, which will then fund a military program to maintain or potentially even expand this protected territory.
again, risk and reward. So I guess it would be way more fun, not necessarily fun, but just a bit more different than reality to, I guess, have a bit more risk collecting resources and fending off potential like pirates or robbers, again, players
I mean,
as well.
I
But
would equate it to that, like, if you were an Amazon worker and instead of like putting things in boxes and then shipping them for 12 hours a day and not being able to go on break and all this, instead of that, you would, play Asteroid Destroyer 12
or
hours a day.
like maybe, I guess a more accurate way to put it is if you were an Amazon worker, would you rather pack boxes for 12 hours a day, or just guard a caravan, for example, like a medieval caravan? And of course, that's more risky, but in a way also more rewarding, more
More
exciting.
fun as well.
Yeah, like, and especially we are talking about a video game and not even real life. So even if you die, then you can just respawn. Like,
I mean, it's kind of weird how like you could be doing the same thing like a Sims, right? Sims, you're just simulating real life. You're doing the same things,
well, except
but
you
you
can load and
consider it
save
fun.
and
Yeah, but I mean more like, let's say there's a game where you couldn't reload, you have one life,
mm,
and after one life you can't do it again. But people would still pay to play that game and have fun because it would be like exciting. Wow, this game you only give one life, one opportunity, and if you die, you paid $60 for the game and it's over. But like it could reflect
I can
You know,
think of
real
several
life.
reasons why it would be a very bad idea to play that game.
Yeah, but
Or
I'm just saying, like people would still do it for fun instead of for work, even though it's the exact same thing.
yeah,
Like,
but
let's say, like Amazon Worker Simulator, people would play that game and consider it fun, even though it's doing the exact same thing as an IRL Amazon worker. It's
yeah,
kind of weird how that works sometimes with people. Like Power Washing Simulator on Steam is a bestseller now, and it's literally just power washing, and that could be considered a job. And you could like, it's weird how like sometimes just doing something virtually will make it fun rather than a job
yeah, but I think the
because there's
main
no physical effort.
point is that it's a layer, like in our life, and not the life itself. Like if you die
Yeah,
in the game, then sure you can never play it again. Like let's assume that you are banned, like not even IP or hardware ID, just person banned in general, and you need a an ID card to play it. Even then, if you die in the game, nothing really changes other than the fact that you can't log in anymore. You still
yeah,
go on
maybe
with your
it's like the
life,
no thing that
but
people like.
it's still different than IRL itself, and maybe that's one reason why the Eve players seek more like adventurous waters. Not even waters. This is not even a ship game. This is a space game, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's just like
you get what
the
I mean.
yeah,
And
the money things work the same, but not the actual execution.
that may be why I would be way more bored. Like if I were in a safe environment, just collecting resources but being taxed more for
Yeah, I
it.
don't know.
Like
Maybe I mean maybe the high of the battle is enough for the thousands of hours of collecting.
yeah, it's just that the
But
risk kind of gives you an adrenaline rush in a way, and like at any moment you could be chased by space pirates, and you have to
and
be on the lookout. You have
maybe
to have a good protecting ship as well.
maybe that makes it worth it. Yeah, I don't know. I think
Yeah,
Atron plays Eve. Maybe we need to ask him why he plays it.
for me that would be the reason to play. Not like if I wanted to just safely work for 12 hours, I could just work somewhere and make more money.
But imagine losing $1 trillion in game, and being like, damn, I could have sold that to some like shady website for like
I mean
$6,000,
that
and like
kind of equates to real life loss at that point, but just
yeah, which is kind of crazy, right?
but
If you think about it,
amassing
like
that much riches is I don't think in the scope of a single Leaf player's
I mean, you
career.
can if you own a corporation and you have enough power and people join you and keep joining
But
you and keep joining.
but you could just make corporations IRL, I guess, like at that point, if you have the networking skills and the drive to do so. Like I don't think that's
Yeah, but the
much
thing is,
difference.
no, but the thing is, in real life, that's not you can't equate it to the same because again, like you said, you can respawn. You probably start with like a basic ship every time that's given to you for free. Like you don't start with a basic car for free in real life. So I don't think it would work that way. But yeah, it's just
Like
um
I just don't see a reason for myself at least to play when I could be effectively working just as I would be working IRL.
yeah, but I
And
mean that's why like people in RuneScape are
hmm,
people just farm gold sometimes. That's their job IRL because they
okay,
can
but
sell it to a website and boom.
hmm,
So you can do the same in Eve.
in a way, I just don't see myself making more money unless I find a super creative and clever way to make money. And well, millions of players are trying to do that in game, and you could just apply the same IRL similarity to that as well. Like just invent something because just invent something, yeah.
I mean, people just say that, if you put like half your hours you've put into World of Warcraft, maybe you'd get a good job or something like that. So
Yeah, but I think it's just as hopeless to wait for a breakthrough that you can make in Eve than like in real life. The chances are almost the same. Like
yeah, but it's a game
just
sim.
coming up with something revolutionary to make way more money. Just like the lumberjack example, just invest in the chainsaws instead. And
But I think it's more like
mm,
E4. The process of building up is almost as fun as the final product.
I mean, I did play MMOs and they are fun adventures and just seeing your character grow stronger and stronger
Yes,
is
yeah,
fun,
like the
but
process is almost as fun as the end game. Maybe not as fun, but almost.
like every MMO I played had some kind of risk, like you dying to monsters or PvP.
There's risk in
If
Eve.
if like every monster in MMOs were hitting for only a single damage, and
Yeah,
there
but
would be
now we're
no
getting into
yeah,
specifics
that then
of
it would be
games,
just
right?
grinding and boring, right?
Yeah, but again, people would have the same opinion in E4. Like, why are
Mm,
we playing E4? It's grindy and boring.
like I EU4 is not really grindy or boring, especially
Yeah, but
multiplayer
no,
not.
that's for you. That's your
I mean,
opinion.
once it becomes grindy and boring, I will stop playing it.
Yeah, but that's for you. That's your personal
That,
opinion.
that's yeah, that's just my view at the yeah.
Yeah, we like E4. That's why I play it.
Yeah, it
But
is
yeah,
some kind of fun.
maybe I think we're like more talking about the game versus game now than the money thing. But yeah, let's keep watching. the video.
Effectively, it's exactly the same as what happens with every government ever in the real world. Now, this is fine in theory, but oftentimes these industrial entities don't have the capacity to wage war themselves. In these circumstances, they can call on mercenary entities that do nothing but wage war on other people's behalf for a fee. Again,
Yeah, I mean, if you get good enough at something, then people will hire you, just as in real life here as well.
not overly dissimilar as to what happens from time to time in the real world with military contract corporations like Academy performing a very similar function. Now, so far we've been looking at the relatively minor wars, the ones that might be a big deal to the players of the game, and the shit posters on r/Eve, but are not exactly that remarkable to an uninvolved onlooker like you or I. But this all changed around 5 years ago. You see, EVE's economy is so realistic and so diverse that at one point there were virtual casinos in the game. These were founded, funded, and operated entirely by regular players using the in-game currency. Of course,
Gambling is a thing again. Casinos, man, you can't even escape them in a game.
I don't know. You have the new gambling wave as well on Twitch.
That shouldn't be a thing, though. Like that,
I don't know. I
honestly,
feel like
the pool and beach streams were a lot more fun than the gambling was. Like, sure, seeing a bunch of half-naked ladies is can be kind of stunting if you are young enough, like to your growth, but gambling is a way different level of just addiction and danger.
I think it's I don't know. I agree somewhat in the fact that like yes, it's very addicting, especially with people whose personalities are very addicting and who can fall into that quite quickly and like, oh look, this guy's doing it and looks cool, let me test it out. But I think it's 50-50. You can't really maybe it's on the platform then to put a lock on it, like anyone over 18 in their account can't join this, instead of like when you can like turn on this Twitch streamer has made it so this is only like
Yeah,
he
this
only
is
wants mature audiences, and then you just click yes I'm mature or whatever, and
of
you
course.
go like that's not a like either you make it like hard locked, like on YouTube when a
Mhm.
YouTuber makes it mature, you need to literally be level 18, Jesus Christ, age 18 on age 18 years of
But
age to watch the video.
isn't that only for Europe though? Like if you go to the
I don't know
USA
actually.
via VPN or something, you can easily
Oh,
just
I guess. But yeah, I feel like this should be a hard lock then, instead of just complaining to the like I don't know, they're still just making, like if someone offers me like if someone offered me today $1 million to do the gambling streams, I'm doing it. Fuck it.
of
There's
course
just
that's
so
$1 million.
much money there that like there's just so much money to be made by doing those streams that it like you need like yeah,
But my
you need to look to yourself like am I going to morally maybe do something morally questionable for the money.
yeah,
And that's what you have to.
if I look at it, the price of my morals is pretty high for a gambling stream, for example. Like there is a
I mean,
price which I would do
I
it
just
for,
think
but it's high.
I just think people can say that, as long as they want, but until they have that check in front of their face, literally, or contract, legally binding, it's on the table. All you have to do is sign it, and it says you will receive 1 million euros a month to stream this, and then tell me you're gonna do that.
I mean,
Then tell me you're gonna reject it. Hell no. Okay,
so
maybe a lot of
that was my
20% maybe people would do it.
that was my
But
point. If it's high enough, I would accept. Like I don't know,
exactly.
maybe 1K, 10K, something like that. But
Like if it's not illegal, right? If it's allowed on the platform where I'm doing it, and like I'm sorry, but you know how many you could buy a house a month in 1 year you'd have 12 houses paying like 15K in rent like a month in constant income. You can turn that 15K a month into something like in 2 years you'd be set for life, if not 1 year, if not 6 months. So like people can judge all they want, but until that money is in the front of their face.
yeah, but here comes another aspect. If let's say you're famous enough so that you get a contract like this, and you lose half of your or was their entire audience over this, then I mean, I guess it's still worth, but it's a huge,
Still $1 million a month.
it's a massive, just bad thing to do to people.
It's
And
a big moral question.
I
It's a
think
big
I,
moral question.
but I think first of all, everything and everyone has a price, but
I'd probably poll it. I'd be like, ask all of Twitch right now, $1 million a month, and you Gamba stream, or you don't. I'd say 95% of people would say I Gamba stream.
I
I'm into
mean,
gambling.
I would if I get enough. My point is that for things that I perceive less moral and more dangerous to my audience would have a way larger price than stuff that wouldn't be that.
That's
Like,
true.
like for example, I would do a bathtub stream for way less than a gambling stream.
That's true. But also, I think there's just level like degree. I think there's very few things that would do that. Like gambling's one, and I probably couldn't think of anything else where it'd be like I would need a very high price, but I'd still do it. Like drugs, no. What else? That's about it, really. There's like not too many things that I would be prepared to like kill someone, no. Like hurt someone, no.
Well,
But $1 million for a gambling stream, fuck yeah, I would do that. What would you do for $1 million? And you're like 30,000 viewer person for years now. 1 million a month.
I actually don't think in that case because you would receive
Because you
way
already have
more
that
from
income?
sponsorships than that. If you would alienate your viewer base, then you would lose way more in the long term than
Yeah,
gain
but
1
look at
million.
the streamers doing it. They're not alienating their viewer base. If anything, they're getting more viewers now because of it.
Depends. Like if you choose your sponsorships cleverly, like you don't just accept anything and everything. Like for example, Raid Shadow Legends, then
Yeah,
you
I
could.
mean that's situational, right? If you're already earning millions from other things, then that 1 million will be like,
Yeah,
whatever.
again, that's relative and in perspective. Like,
Or let's say
it's
you're
basically
earning like
the payriest.
100.
Yeah, it's the payriest thing again.
Yeah, like if you're earning 100,000. Yeah, okay, that million is still way more than 100,000, but like 100,000 is already kind of a nice number. You're
But-
probably earning a lot of money from subs as well. So you could be like, I don't want to do the moral thing, so I'm gonna say no. But like if you're fresh, some Twitter guy on Twitter's like, oh, I would never do that. Like, fuck you, dude. $1 million tomorrow in front of your face, gambler stream or not, you would do it. Stop.
But
Stop.
who
Stop
would
doing it.
pay for it for somebody who has no viewers? Though that's the main
Yeah, that's
issue.
fair. But yeah, that's just in that case. But I'm just saying, like, yeah, I feel it's weird, like people judging these guys for doing it. When I feel like you could easily see why they're doing it. Like, it's very easy to see why.
I mean, there is that amount of money where you don't care you being judged. Yeah.
Yeah, like why do people do bank robberies? Because okay, maybe they're gonna alienate their family. They're gonna
That's a
hurt their
different story.
relatives.
Like committing a crime and doing immoral things is two different
Yeah, but like,
things. Like if you get punished for it, for example, bank robbery or for taking somebody's life, then
why are people doing the bathtub streams, right?
because they don't
it's
really
kinda more
receive
of a-
any punishment for it.
Yeah, but there's no real punishment for gambling streaming.
Yeah, there's not.
It's just the moral
That's
question.
the difference between actual.
They're making
like,
a shit ton of money.
yeah.
Like that's the So there we go. Yeah, but let's continue with the video. But I think that's like weird. Like people are judging so hard. I disagree with it. I would also.
Oh my god! Wait. Oh, the Artemis. Hello. 8 months. God damn.
Artemis Foul
So yeah,
just
I prefer
subscribed.
if the world
Teteges.
was a happy place, but it's not. And if someone offered me $1 million, like I wouldn't be so fast to judge these people. But yeah, let's continue with the video.
These casinos generated massive profits, just like most of them do in the real world. Now, these in-game profits were great and all, but there really wasn't much that they could do with them on an individual level. That kind of money can buy every spaceship in the game many times over, so they needed something grander to put their money towards. The logical answer was to sell the in-game money for real-world money, whether it was allowed or not. Sure, they risked getting banned from a video game, but the collective total of ISK that these casinos generated was worth millions of dollars. So, that was a risk that a lot of these casino owners were willing to take. This was especially convenient, given that the thousands of transactions that the casinos handled daily were the perfect cover for in-game money laundering. It was almost impossible to distinguish between transactions that were legitimate and those that weren't. Again, very similar to casinos in the real world, which are continually in the news for being centers of money laundering. However, the more honorable casino owners decided to use their space dollars to buy something not available on the public market: influence. 2016 kicked off the so-called Casino Wars, as the I Want ISK online casino funded a coalition of players to wage war on the single most powerful corporation in the game at the time, which had wronged the casino in a previous business deal. In reality, all of these other player-run organizations were looking for any excuse to go to war in an attempt to bring the Imperium, as it's known, in check. They simply lacked the financial backing to undertake such a significant challenge. But with the casinos writing the checks as a way to prove a point as to what happens when you dishonor a business deal, one of the most devastating wars in the game's history was enabled, which in turn gave us PC Gamer articles about spectacular space battles. And yes, the financing behind it might have been a little less spectacular, but that doesn't mean that it's any less interesting. Now, shortly following this war, the developers of EVE Online decided to put an end to these player-run casinos. Now, they said they had their own reasons, but most players speculate that it was a combination of wanting to cut down on the trade of in-game money for real money, and also as a response to player backlash over these entities having too much power over the game.
So like something like that, I'd also if I was earning millions of dollars a month by selling like a currency, like a game currency, even if it wasn't allowed, I would do that as well. 100%.
In-game, yes, because the worst thing that could happen is that you get banned for it. Sure, you lose all your in-game stuff, but you still get to keep the money.
Yeah, and let's say like you're part of an organization, like you would instantly get a rank, or they could give you stuff, to get back to that position really quickly.
Yeah, that.
So 100% I would sell
absolutely
game currency for real money. Of course, Twitch, I wouldn't do that. Hypothetically, I would sell it.
I mean, I haven't done it, and I probably am not gonna be rich enough to do it in any game, but I see why people like to do it.
I mean, people do it in RuneScape, people do it in fucking Clash of Clans, people do it any game where there's a currency. People like in-game made currency, like not like V-Bucks or like something like that, but like you're farming gold, or you're farming ISK here in this case, or you're farming whatever. What's another game with like in-game currency mining?
Any MMO really, I think.
Yeah, any MMO, like World of Warcraft Gold. I mean, that's always gonna happen.
Yeah, I think the main point is that it's only in-game punishments and not IRL punishments.
Like, I mean, it just shows you that like how this reflects like people will try to make money in any way.
I mean, sure, the game company can try and sue you for it, but is it going to be successful? Sure, you broke the code of conduct, but
I don't really think
are they really successful? Not really.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, and this is basically why I don't want to start playing EVE, because you see everyone just having figured out a lot of good and efficient way to make money. And
I mean, the best way.
I'm sitting here and trying to mine asteroids meanwhile.
I mean, the only way probably you would be able to do it, like to reach a certain height, was probably join one of these groups.
Yeah,
and get them to help you, basically.
Yeah, and I would be a small fish for a long time. Like nobody likes playing as a small fish in a big
forever,
big.
Basically.
Yeah.
This meant was that in 2020, there was a new funding model required. The old belligerents from the casino war were ready to go at it again, only this time a few things were different. For starters, the casinos were no more, which meant that no side would have limitless funding to them. What's more is that 2020 was a year of working from home with no other options for entertainment besides sitting in front of a computer playing video games. This was all shaping up to create potentially the largest conflict in the game's history, a conflict that would also be the most costly. The most crucial battles during this conflict were inevitably going to be decided by who could bring the largest ships in the game to bear, the Titans.
Crazy.
These ships are extremely powerful, and were at least up until recently extremely rare. But changes in the game in recent years had meant that these industrial powerhouses could produce these once legendary ships as if they're Ford Model Ts.
Just make larger and more rare Titans. Problem solved.
Yeah, it's like a problem that is easily solvable. But again, as a game company, you might not want to do it. But yeah, the guy Tom in chat actually brings up a thing. Venezuelan gold farmers be like, I mean, in Venezuela, there's actually a new way to make money because inflation is so high there, by like 50,000-60,000% inflation. They farm gold in RuneScape, sell that gold for US dollar, and so make their money that way. It's actually a very good way to make money in Venezuela right now.
Yeah,
it's a huge like thing.
Yeah, it's basically the average or minimum wage difference and the like cost of living in a way.
I mean, they even make good money for standards that we're living over there. But yeah, some of them are like have been like forced to play. It's kind of weird. Like you were playing this game for fun, and then to your real life circumstances, you have to start like really doing it as like a job and farming gold to sell IRL to make money in real life. So
Hey, if it makes you more money than just regular jobs there, then sure. Like, I think we did talk about this before. Like, Nix is from Moldova and he almost makes a living from just Twitch streaming. But for you, for example, it wouldn't be a living even. Like, not even 1/10 of
at
a
his
living.
level, no, it would not be. I would not be able to live. And
Yeah, this is
I mean,
it.
maybe as I live now, yes, like as a student. But
Yeah,
once
but you get what I
if
mean.
I want
Like,
to buy my own, yeah, if I want to buy my own house or anything, it wouldn't. But yeah, like I can move to Moldova, and maybe yes, it would help me. But
actually, that's interesting because some German like seniors and like retire to Lake Balaton, for example, in Hungary, just they can pretty much live a lowish lifestyle out of all the retirement funds that they get from Germany, basically. Like
mm.
the cost of living is way lower here.
Yeah,
So
I mean, you're seeing that a lot more actually now that people are moving to countries with lower living costs because quality of life is increasing even in those countries by quite a bit actually. Amenities and you can find modern everything in Hungary is a modern country.
relatively,
Maybe
yes,
not
yes.
maybe not so modern politics, but
I mean, it's in
modern.
Europe,
Yeah,
so
it's it has access to all the things that Europe can offer, but not at the cost that others are paying, right? So that yeah, so it's I mean it's smart if anything, but you're seeing it a lot more now, especially with like rising inflation in these other countries.
I just wonder
And
if with like all of the home office changes that COVID brought us, would the equalizing be more quick now?
I mean, um, I think the barriers of entry are a lot less now, especially education wise, right? They said it right. You don't need 3 years of education is worth a lot less now than it was 30 years ago.
I mean, I'm not
But
even
also,
talking about that, but rather that
yeah, but I'm just saying like, and now it's just you know you need a laptop and a place with internet, right? You don't need a car anymore. You don't need money for public transport. You don't need a new suit. You can
like
just wear whatever.
you don't even
There's a
need
lot
to
of
live.
costs that are lost.
You don't even need to
You
live
don't
in
need to
a
live.
crowded
Yeah,
place. Yeah, you can
exactly.
just go to a village and live there. Or
Yes.
even like taking a larger leap, just hire other countries' workforce. Like for example, India. Like people have been doing people have been outsourcing jobs even before COVID and
For sure. But I
now
think the
it's
jobs that were affected by COVID, right? That were office jobs.
and
I
like
don't. Those aren't
coding.
necessarily as easily outsourced. But
But what's the difference
if
between somebody who is home officing and somebody who is in India? The difference is less than like
I mean, probably
actually.
maybe level of education or
I bet you can find somebody in India who is
I mean, I'm
also
sure
educated
that
enough.
of course, but I'm sure that it's shown that to companies that that's a possibility that they're like, Timmy, who we're paying 40,000 a year, is doing the same job that maybe we can have someone else in India do for $1,000 a month, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's actually pretty scary because for somebody in the like more expensive parts of the world, if they are not skilled enough, then they will be paid way less. Like it's basically paying somebody for their skill. And if a guy in
but
India
that's the
is
same
super
everywhere.
good,
I think that's been the same for hundreds of years. You're paying someone for their
yeah,
skill.
but
That's always been
it's
the case.
been slowly and slowly equalizing, but it's becoming way quicker now. Like if
Isn't
if
that good?
somebody
That's
is
good though, right?
uh, depends for who. Like if somebody is unskilled in Europe, then I mean, of course, you can do manual labor and everything else, but if you're not skilled enough, you won't be able to work like programming or anything like that requires you to be good at your job. Like you could
It's
just
true, but a lot of people are getting more educated, right? I mean,
depends.
it's a lot easier to get like online certificates now and stuff like that. And a lot of companies are starting to accept that as equal to a degree.
But yeah, but
Um,
you're also competing with a lot more people if it's global. Like
but that's always been the case. I mean, that's not always been the case, but it's been the case for like the last 10 years. And again, new jobs will always develop. Local markets will always develop. Um, and we could say, yeah, okay, it's shown that maybe we can outsource to India, but um, there's a fact that the fact that you know your local market, the fact that you have that you speak English very well, that you have been taught other languages, the fact that you are able to travel, the fact that you know, I don't know, yeah,
I
not
mean,
not everything is outsourceable. Not everything can be done
of course not, of
autonomously,
course not.
and that'll be the saving grace of of the average human.
Yeah, but aren't
Um,
aren't those like less paying jobs in the first place?
Not always, not always.
Okay, some of them are not, but
Like look at like Twitch streaming wasn't a job 10 years ago, and now it is. There's so much like being an Uber driver wasn't a job 10 years ago, now it is. Renting out your house via Airbnb wasn't a job 10 years ago, now it is. There's so
yeah,
many
but
new
like,
types of jobs, and like you can't even envision what product or what
but
service
then again,
is going to happen in 10 years.
unless you're really good at Twitch streaming, you won't be making an insane living,
No, but I'm
and
just saying, no,
I don't think you will get rich
don't
from
look at
just Uber
specifics here.
driving.
No, don't look at specifics here. Just look at new jobs, new job types. Like there's jobs that will be here in 10 years that we would never have thought of.
Like you
Like
mean
regardless of
non-outsourceable
scale.
jobs?
Well, no, but just new types of jobs, whether they can be outsourced or not.
I mean, if they can be outsourced, then you will be competing with the entire world now. Because I mean,
Yeah, but you'll be looking at a lot more service jobs, and that's not necessarily true. A lot of people just want people that look like them, talk like them, you know, dress like them, act like them. Uh,
yeah,
so
that's
yeah,
that's
you can
also fair.
outsource, but that's not all. And also service jobs, are locally. They can be global. Yeah, and yeah, okay, you might be competing with everyone, but not everyone wants to move. There's a lot of people that just want to live in their village and never move, ever.
I mean, of course, I'm biased because I'm a programmer myself, but I just view it that way. I mean, I'm all for home office. If anything, that's the best thing that could happen from this 2 year mess now. That whenever I work for a company, I won't have to travel in all 5 days, and that's good and everything. But
I
that
mean, there's
also has
also some
downsides. Yeah,
negatives as well,
yeah, those are
right? That
exactly the
have
downsides that what we mentioned before.
you may have some people. Some people, I would include myself in that. Some people just need to be not need. Like I don't like to use the words like need to be forced to do something, but like if someone, let's say I'm working from home. If there is never an opportunity to go to a bar or restaurant, I may not be inclined to do that, and I may never know that that's fun to do. So if I'm never put in a situation where I need to meet a client in a restaurant or go to this company headquarters that's across the city and I need to take the tram or the bus or I need to walk, I'll never experience the parks that are on the way. I'll never, experience the food in a restaurant. So I may not know that's fun and I may live a lot more sheltered life than I would again, it's a little bit like if you don't know, you don't know what you're losing, but again, is that a situation you want to be in? That you
Mm,
don't know of anything, and so you're not really losing anything. But that means you're also not gaining anything.
I
Um,
guess one solution could be that it's a hybrid like commute that maybe
yeah,
one
that's.
or
I
two
think
years.
that's actually
Yeah,
that is what people want. They want a hybrid situation where they can choose to go to the company headquarters, but also stay at home.
yeah, maybe just 1 or 2 days out of 5. That
Mhm.
would be ideal.
That's what people are voting for, basically. Yeah.
Artemis, wait, Artemis. I think he's more versed in Eve than we are, because he knows that this footage is not from the Casino War. Although to be fair, this is not the Casino War anymore. This is the 2020 war,
Yeah, this is
the follow-up
the
war.
2020 post COVID war. And also this guy's not a Eve Online expert, so he may have made a mistake. So, but yeah,
Didn't mean that they were any less expensive, however. It just meant that the powers that be had to bring more of them to keep up with their opposition. The side that had been previously funded by the casinos were happy to fund this war in the traditional way, using the tax money they had collected over the years of peace and prosperity to foot the bill for these battles. But the Imperium had a better idea. They had seen how finance had decided their fate in 2016, and were keen to ensure they were economically dominant going into the War of 2020. So, they once again looked to reality for inspiration. War bonds are often issued by governments during periods of all-out conflict. This is because modern wars are expensive, and raising taxes is often impossible if the entire economy has been dedicated towards the war effort. So, Government bonds are issued so that people can invest their money in their own nation's victory. The Imperium did exactly this. They sold off a series of bonds that would pay interest to their own members. This was obviously great for the Imperium itself because it got the much needed capital injection it needed to go off and fight the war, but it was also great for the members of the group as well. Scams and financial fraud are commonplace in EVE, and there is no regulation about taking someone's stuff and never giving it back.
It's basically like death warring in EU4, right? Like just taking out all the loans that you can.
Basically, but there's a reward for both sides. In,
I mean,
in E4, everyone loses.
Won't they have to spend years recovering after that, like financially? Just paying out the bonds and everything?
It's a bit like the U.S. government, right? I mean, they could just make more.
That's
bonds.
fair.
But yeah, but it's still win-win because you're increasing the volume, regardless of credit or debt.
I mean, you have to.
And who knows? Maybe because of their win, they can get more, like let's say 10% more income, and that's 10% can make them more money and ultimately pay it off. Or that 10% that they gain will pay off the bonds, and then paying off those bonds lets them get more bonds, making them more money, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, that's also about just staying alive, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like if
and also, you're like the 10% you gain doesn't mean that's all you're gaining from your opponent, right? That's also 10% your opponent's losing, so the change is 20%.
A bit more even, but yeah. Well, that's.
I mean, I'm just talking the change. So you're gaining 10%, they're losing 10%, so the total change is 20%. So yeah, I mean it's crazy.
In fact, these types of swindles are probably the thing that EVE is third best known for. But while having a totally unregulated financial system is great for cool stories, it's terrible for investing. Because, well, anything you invest can and likely will just be stolen off you, so why bother? These war bonds presented an opportunity for players to invest in an asset that didn't have quite the same risk of being stolen. For clarity, the Imperium would be fully within their rights to turn around and tell these investors to get stuffed, but the hit to their entity's reputation would likely not be worth it, especially if they ever wanted to sell war bonds again to fund future wars. Now, that doesn't mean that these in-game financial instruments are totally without risk. If the Imperium gets destroyed in this ongoing war, well then,
I don't even know who your enemy is there.
I think it's a coalition, a big coalition of other smaller factions, right?
I mean, but I'm just saying in that battle.
Oh yeah.
Like you're shooting. Who the fuck? Or like, what are you shooting
I
at?
think they are in comms with somebody who is a commander and has some idea, and also I bet the game system is still in them in a way, like.
Yeah, but that's
them, yeah.
Just look at that, like 2,000. Like,
it's crazy, yeah. Like, I'm not sure how I would be feeling in a small battleship there. That will be a bit scary.
What am I even doing here? I'm shooting 1 damage. This guy's like a huge ship, 1 trillion damage in 1 hit.
Yeah, fucking death laser there, and I'm just using a pea shooter. Yeah, it's fun to witness at least, I think.
Yeah, I think
being part of the battle would be nice.
Yeah. In the real world, credit analysts call this sovereign risk, and it's no less important here as it is in the land of internet spaceships. But for now at least, this war is still ongoing, and it's likely to provide gaming magazines and aspiring YouTube channels alike many more things to talk about, like the fact that this game's financial markets predicted the short squeeze on GameStop. So make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see us make a video on that. And in the meantime, go and watch.
I do, but I don't think I've seen a video yet, like on that channel. I actually looked it up after. I don't think I would be interested to see the GameStop as a resemblance in EVE, but yeah, the video has not been made yet.
It's kind of crazy. In 1 month, there's like 20,000 people playing a day. Almost. Oh, there's 6 servers though. Wow. It's just a lot of people playing. Holy shit.
Yeah, it's a very big game. That's why it's famous, and that's why it's working. The simulation, I mean.
Actually, there's only 2 big servers. Actually, never mind. But yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. 500,000 people play a month. I mean, yeah, so it's a good description of how the real world works, basically.
I mean, if you have enough variables, then you can simulate it rather accurately, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike like a regular MMO, even World of Warcraft doesn't. Although World of Warcraft kind of has the similar depth, like as in, think of it similarly as like for example a picture, how pixelated it is. If you have enough space, then you can make a way clearer picture.
That's true.
It's the same thing here. If you have enough players and variables, you can make a more and more accurate simulation of the real world.
True, especially if they do things that reflect the real world, like sell war bonds and make as much money and do casinos and stuff. So yeah, I have time for one more video. So
All right,
let's
go
choose
with this.
either one. You want this one, the recession? Gotcha.
Let's just go with that. Yeah, I think we can skip the bullshit jobs part. I mean, it would be interesting to hear your opinion as well, but I think while we are on topic with Eve, then
I mean, I can quickly go. I would say any job that makes money is not a bullshit job. I think it's very opinionated. What is a bullshit job might not be a
makes money
bullshit
for
job to
who?
you.
For the worker or for the company?
Any job that makes money, doesn't matter for who the money is earned for.
That's fair.
A job is meant to create money. There's no, in my opinion, there is no bullshit job. That is, that's very opinion based, and yeah, no. Like like someone who picks flowers in the Netherlands, like let's say you're a country that hates flowers, you've always, like, as a culture, you've always looked down on flowers. Like, flowers, what the fuck? That's so dumb. But in the Netherlands, flowers are so prized, like they're a gift, and people love them. And that's a bullshit job. But it's opinion based.
I mean, I
It
think
makes money, so it doesn't matter.
If I think the definition of bullshit jobs, according to him, is that a company doesn't really need to pay it, or it doesn't bring any value to the company that finances it.
I disagree with that again, because if a job will do a couple things, it might save you time, it might save you money, it might save you resources. Like,
yeah, but it doesn't. If it doesn't do any of these,
I don't think there's a job that does that.
Hmm.
Like, what, air breather? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like it's another headline taker.
Yeah, we would have to watch we would have to watch the entire video for it if we want to dig deeper into that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But like, let's do the recession in MMORPG.
This is a virtual spaceship in the video game EVE Online. There are tens of thousands of ships like this floating around the game, but this particular one is special. That's because it costs as much as a second-hand Toyota. Why? Well, we'll get to that. But the answer can actually tell us a lot about the state of our economy in the real world. Now, this is going to be the fourth and final installment in my series on EVE Online. I only ever planned to do one of these videos, but the more I started to learn about the game, the more the players reached out to me to tell me about some crazy business deal or economic system taking place within this virtual universe. But because I promised myself I wouldn't turn this into a channel where I exclusively geek out about video games, I am going to look at 3 smaller topics in this video so I don't feel as if I had left anything out. Now, these mini topics are a look at the self-imposed recession the game is in at the moment, how this game is breaking our traditional understanding of the market for collector's items, and finally, what would happen to this video game if it allowed for the trade of in-game assets for real money. Thanks for the suggestion, St. Michael. So, it's time to learn how money works, to see how this video game keeps on surprising gamers, economists, and wannabe YouTubers alike. A few years ago, the galaxy within EVE Online was facing a problem. Abundance. An abundance of materials, an abundance of fuel, an abundance of high-paying income sources, and an abundance of safe space to harvest these materials, fuels, and space shekels. Now, while this might sound like a really good problem to have, and it would be in the real world, it does cause some problems in a video game. The biggest problem simply being that it's boring. Try playing GTA 5 with God mode hacks on, and after punching some fighter jets out of the sky, you are going to get bored pretty fast. And people were getting bored. The largest groups in EVE Online were, up until recently, playing a game of build as much as you possibly can so it becomes almost impossible for any smaller group to ever catch up. The fact that this is a video game and materials respawn naturally over time accommodated this mindset perfectly, but abundance does not drive conflict. If every country in the world had access to raw materials that respond on a 24-hour timer, there would be significantly less conflict in the world. Extrapolate that out to the extreme, and consider a world where there are no resource constraints at all. Theoretically, there would be no good reason to fight.
But there are other reasons, but let's not get into that.
People always find a reason to fight.
Yeah.
Again, in the real world that sounds fantastic, and hopefully in the not so distant future we really do live in such a post-scarcity society. But in a video game, even one as dynamic as EVE Online, it's the last thing you want, and so, the age of scarcity was introduced by the developers. The people that do play EVE know what this is all about. And for those of you who don't, CCP, the people who make the game, not to be confused with that CCP, basically made materials far harder to come by. They did this while simultaneously increasing the materials needed to build things like spaceships and modules in the game. A Titan, the largest and most powerful ship in the game, used to cost about 40 billion ISK to build, the equivalent of around $1,000 give or take a bit. Today, to build a Titan from scratch would cost around 250 billion ISK, more than 5,000 real-world American dollars.
Wait. Remember that scene earlier, the big battle scene? How many Titans were in there?
Hundreds.
That's a shitload of money.
Yeah.
These ships were the mainstay of the largest
Oh,
player
that is.
empires, but suddenly these organizations are far less keen to take them into battle, because once lost, they will be very expensive to replace. This price inflation also extends down to other more common ships that get used every day. Even the most basic combat ships in the game have doubled in price, which is ironically enough actually suppressing the conflict that the game developers wanted to encourage with this change. Sure, the big empires will need to fight it out to control a diminishing pool of resources, which I'm sure will make for plenty of amazing headlines about epic space battles involving thousands of players. But the average player might just decide that collecting ISK has become too hard, especially when they need twice as much of it to go out there and fly a ship around. In economics, this whole scenario has a name. It's called stagflation, and it's really bad. Prices rising while income is falling means that people's quality of life will decrease rapidly, and that may be what is happening here. Since the introduction of the Age of Scarcity, EVE has seen a significant reduction in active players, because believe it or not, living in an economy that's going through such economic decline is not fun, even if it does involve virtual spaceships. It's unusual to see an economy voluntarily subject itself to stagflation, but for what it's worth, some of the largest conflicts in the real world have followed periods of stagflation, so maybe the game developers are onto something here. Most ships in EVE Online can theoretically be mass-produced.
So about the first out of the three. Yeah, I have to reiterate my point on why would I be playing the game if I can achieve even less and less? Like, I see why it drove people away.
Yeah, I see it as well. I just think that there's probably a better way to
To shake up things, I guess.
yeah, I think incentivization always works better than diminishing something or reducing something or taking something away.
I mean, if you...
I would have made it maybe add maybe instead of ISK being, maybe add like an honor system or like ranks, right? Or like if you kill this many ships as a group, you get these incentives. Maybe add a new expansion with like new planets, and these planets can only be taken with war, right? There's so many other ways. Like I literally 5 seconds I was thinking about it. I literally mentioned like 3 ideas. I find it a bit weird that they would maybe they didn't think that it would reduce player numbers, and it did.
I mean, they do have to spend it on something, but why increase the most basic, like, cost of living in a way, if you count spaceships as a cost of living?
Yeah, maybe make some things that were only applicable to those Titan ships expensive, but I think it's a little bit like the real world, right? It's very hard to target something very specifically. So what you'll have is you'll sanction something or you'll increase the price of something, and then you'll hurt the enemy or whatever, or the bad country has a dictator, but you're also hurting the people that live there, maybe the people that work with the people there. So it's a bit like real life as well. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
tough lesson.
The game needed some kind of money sink, and I don't think this was, well, to be fair, it depends on what they wanted to achieve, but yeah, I don't think this is the right way to put a money sink into the game. But then again, if they are trying to simulate IRL, then
And
don't-
I think Artemis makes a good point as well.
Mhm.
Apparently, it's also because bots were getting banned and because of the
Oh.
mining is not as profitable anymore. So these bots aren't worth it, maybe as well.
Wait, but then wouldn't hand miners be a lot more richer in that case?
Maybe, but the just to explain the player number thing, the bots are probably
Oh yeah,
a
yeah,
large
yeah.
large part of the player base.
Even the aforementioned Titans were, up until recently, being constructed on assembly lines all across the galaxy in huge numbers. But there are some ships in this game that are a little bit different. Alliance Tournament ships. The game developers used to have an annual in-game competition called the Alliance Tournament, or
Well-
AT.
But why stop it? It's a great money sink. Oh well, I guess I'm.
Well, we'll see what they say. Maybe.
This was a tournament that tested the skill of the top players in the game to see who was the best at shooting their opposition in the face. The reward for winning or placing in this competition was a selection of ships that were limited in number, normally to 50 each. It's kind of like if the Olympics gave out spaceships instead of gold medals. Anyway, the thing with these ships is that once they are given out, that's it. There are no more. If one gets destroyed, well then only 49 of them will remain in existence. That one is never coming back, and whoever was flying it will either have to buy one of the remaining ships or never fly that ship ever again.
Okay, that would be way too much responsibility for me at least.
I would hate that. Bro.
Yeah, I would never ever fly that thing. Like I would just sell it, to be fair.
I would keep it. It's in a garage or something.
That's fair. It also like keeps increasing in value, I guess. But
Sure.
I would be way too anxious to actually fly it like ever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's better than the others.
True.
Now, of course, given their rarity and their prominent history, these ships have become collector's items, and expensive ones at that. But most of these AT ships are really good in the game itself. For people that don't play the game, think of it like being able to use a Formula 1 car at your local go-kart track. But here's the thing. Their price actually depends a lot more on how good they are rather than how rare they are. There are some of these ships where only a dozen or so remain in active circulation, but
I mean, I would actually see a way of this system working. If for example, there would be a monthly tournament where, let's say, 50 of these prize shields would be distributed every month. There would still be a steady supply, but it would be very low. That would be
Yeah,
interesting.
maybe. I would just. I don't. Did they stop this AT
I-
thing?
I
Because it said recession. So let's see if maybe they stopped it, and that's why it's leading to a recession. I'm not really sure.
they may not have stats in the game to make them that competitive.
I mean, I guess they made unique rewards for every single tournament, and yeah, I'm not sure.
Now, normally to high-end status goods like this, performance doesn't really matter. A Rolex objectively keeps worse time than the phone in your pocket. But people pay for the prestige of the item because they are rare and can be used to impress your friends. Now, this is typically thought of as a supply-side issue. There is a limited number of these collectible items, so only the people who are willing to pay top dollar for them ever get any. But this dynamic here shows that the demand side might be a bigger factor than most people realize when studying these bizarre marketplaces. Now, despite all of that, you might still think, who the fuck uses something so valuable in a video game when it could be lost by something as simple as your internet going out?
Exactly.
Surely it takes a special type of person, right? Well, anyway, this is mine, and I'm very proud of it. Not really, but thank you to the anonymous viewer who let me borrow it to take this footage. I don't know why they did. Scams are totally allowed in this game, so I could have just kept this and he would have been out a $10,000 spaceship. Now, anyway, this crazy person
Can you
explained
imagine?
that if they
I mean, he has a
were
YouTube
given
channel
the
big
opportunity
enough.
to sell this ship for real money, they would probably take it. But unfortunately, the game does not allow for the sale of in-game assets for real money. In fact, the closest the game has ever got to allowing this is in their charity giveaways, the most well-known of which involved the YouTuber Scott Manley paying the equivalent of $30,000 for one of these ships in a charity auction using the in-game money. Keelan Darklight, the person that sold the ship to him, then used this in-game money to buy Plex. Plex is an in-game asset that can be used to play the game for free, or for a variety of other in-game services like decorating your ships. Keelan then took this massive pile of Plex and then gave it to CCP, the game developers, who in turn paid out the equivalent value of that Plex to a charity. A heartwarming story for sure, but what would happen if that Plex could be given to CCP and they would give you the money rather than handing it off to some charity? In an interview, the founder and CEO of the game said that this was something they might consider one day. But the thing is, the game has now been around for close on 20 years. There are some people who have played for a seriously long time and built up some seriously huge fortunes. Opening the floodgates to being able to convert those fortunes into something that could buy a house or a car rather than just internet spaceships is going to cause some problems in the short term. Mostly, everybody will just be trying to sell off everything they own, which will make the price of the in-game assets fall, and the price of Plex, the item that is required to facilitate this exchange, skyrocket. Now, this means that most players won't actually be able to realize the market value of their internet spaceships, and would likely end up only selling them for pennies on the dollar. But it would be good for those people that actually pay money to enjoy the game, so it really is not as crazy as an idea as most people think.
I mean, if it were me, I would try to get on it as quick as possible, then maybe repurchase it later for less money.
I mean, that's what happens with stocks as well. People
Yeah,
sell at a
but
high, the stock lowers, they buy the same amount of shares, but they have a profit, the money left over.
I mean, just looking at it this way, it's kind of guaranteed to plummet if you get on it quick enough. And unlike stocks, this will be available for everyone, like the information at the same time.
I mean, the thing about stocks is a lot of the information is available to everyone as well.
I mean, but
It's
it
just
takes more time and complexity to analyze it, I
I mean, look
guess.
at the EVE Online spreadsheet. That shit looks difficult as fuck
But
as well.
that's fair,
I
but
think it's just like people make it as hard as they want it to be. You know, like if you have a drive or the want to learn, you're gonna find ways to make it easier for you.
I mean,
So
obviously it's gonna
it's
equalize
kind
at
of the
one
same.
point, like the price, but it's gonna go down a lot at the very first day.
Yeah, but that's just economics.
Yeah, I would just try to get on it as quick as possible, and if I cannot get on it, then just keep the stuff as it is.
I mean, that's the same as with with things
Yeah,
like
that,
cryptocurrency. You know, you want to be there the first guy. You want to sell at a high, and if you're not there, you're gonna feel left out. It's a danger with the real stocks as well. You know, the feeling of not being with the wave,
or the
right? Of
fear of
missing out
missing
on
out,
a
the
lot of money.
FOMO. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's a very dangerous as well because people make huge mistakes. I mean, people can make millions of dollars, but people can also make a huge mistake. You know, oh, it'll be there for another week, another week, another week, and then I get on the last week, and I'm like, I'm in, man, I'm in the wave, and then it crashes the next
oh,
day, and I lost all my money. So, um, and also I think a lot of there's also questionable things that there have been games that allow for real life currency to transfer into in-game currency, and then in-game currency also to leave and become real currency. And there's a question about whether certain people at those companies won't abuse that, right?
or
Who's to say that
just add
I
money to
as
themselves and then sell it.
yeah, exactly. So there's a big issue there as well of some ethical things.
I
So I think
I
that's probably the
hmm.
main reason people haven't made that companies decide not to do that, because it's like giving yourself keys to the kingdom. Like who's gonna stop you from just trickling
I
a
honestly,
little
I
bit
guess
of
the
money away?
CEO probably.
Yeah, but if you're an evil-minded person and you're like, I'm gonna make some money here for myself as CEO, extra $1
The
million
CEO
a
can
year.
absolutely do that, but then again, I don't think it's any worse than, for example, whaling for a pay-to-win game. It's the same thing. Somebody is out there who is willing to
Yeah,
pay that
but
much.
if you're doing it in a way that because you're the developer, you can just click a couple buttons, that's illegal. So, that's unethical as well. So if
Yeah, like converting it back is a different story.
yeah, so that is the main reason that companies decide not to do that,
I mean,
because
obviously
they
the
can't just
price
yeah.
would inflate a bit. That's just like printing money in a way. It introduces
Yeah, but
inflation to your game.
there's definitely a period where it'd be immensely profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Or you would do it at such low volume compared to everything, right? But at a
I
volume where
don't
you're
think
still
you
making a shit
can.
ton of money.
I don't think you can do it in such a low volume and still profit from it.
Yeah, you can. I mean, let's say there's a trillion
Okay, if your game is that big,
disk,
you
right?
don't even need to do that.
Yeah, if your game is that big that your million that you're selling won't really have that much of an impact, but will still give you like $100,000 a month, Where's the moral thing there? So that's very dangerous, and I think that's one of the main reasons that a lot of companies won't do that.
Yeah, and
Because of the
also
moral implications.
also if there is profit to make, then people would be botting on it in any cost, like
Oh, 100%.
and
And it would ruin the
yeah,
in-game economy.
pretty
sure.
much. As he's saying, it's gonna happen with EV if they do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's already kind of happening, even though it's illegal. So, with every game, CS:GO with cases and skins, RuneScape with gold, World of Warcraft with gold, fucking Clash of Clans with gems or whatever. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, but it's a lot lower pace,
Yeah.
and also if you get found out, you eventually get banned, and so there is a risk
Yeah,
at
true,
least.
but so opening the floodgates would be crazy.
Yeah, like making it legal is a whole different story.
Mhm.
And let's just finish up the video the last 40 seconds or
Yeah.
30.
In the short term, it would be chaotic. But in the long term, it may genuinely add a level of stability to the virtual economy and make all those headlines about million-dollar spaceship battles all more relevant. Now, if you're wondering who pays for those battles these days, go and watch my other videos on the financial.
Would it test
I don't know
stability
about
though?
stability.
Yeah,
I
like
don't know about that stability thing. That is assuming no one is taking advantage of it, and that's almost whenever someone's making money, you're gonna have someone that's trying to like game the system or scam or do something like that to yeah,
I
you know what I'm saying? Like
I
to
think
get the advantage.
at that point, instead of grinding like in game in the game itself, it would be way more profitable and even effective to just work a second job and pay for it that way. At
Yeah,
least,
and maybe you can start manipulating markets, right? If there's a day where ISK is a little lower and you think it's a little low. It's like it's like the actual market, like currency exchanges. You think the dollar is going to be worth more tomorrow. You buy $1 million today, you sell $1 million tomorrow at a price of 1.1, so you have $1 million with $100,000 profit. You could do the same with in-game currency. Like I think ISK is going to be worth a little more tomorrow, so I'm going to go buy a shit ton today and sell tomorrow. Like it's gonna go. Yeah, there's so many
and
more possibilities,
and it
and
will
not
be
all of them
also
are positive.
yeah, it will be also like more legal in a way to influence the price drop and or the price rise as well, like in game.
And also, let's say let's say it is stable, right? But as you saw with the decision they made, to make resources more expensive, you could have you can make your livelihood on on making money through this game, and then all of a sudden, developer changes one thing, and you're fucked. So I think that's what yeah, you're so dependent on someone. I would never recommend making money through a game,
Yeah,
ever.
not by hand at least. Like that is kind of my point that it would no longer be ever profitable to mine by hand. There will always
Yeah,
be a person who writes a different bot program for it, and it will be way more effective than you will ever be.
yeah, I would always recommend just keep games like games, right? That's why I don't like loot boxes. That's why I don't like pay to win type of things. That never helps anybody, except the developer, basically.
And well, yeah, I think I did watch a video about this recently that how whaling works in mobile games, and like
Like veiling? What do you mean?
just depositing an insane amount of money for advantage, like basically pay to winning on a huge scale.
Yeah, on mobile games, you have that quite a bit actually. Because mobile games are a lot more popular in Asia and stuff, where you have very rich young Asian men and women that have money to spend on this. And so instead of spending money on video games, you spend them on mobile games. Um, but again, that's like more of like a lot of those games are like, yeah, maybe the top, but a lot of those games don't have like tournaments or something like that where like real life money.
Just
Like it's
leaderboards.
like yeah, and there it's just like the higher the number, the better you are. But in video games, it's more like skill that puts you there instead of money. Like money can't buy you skill.
Depends on what game,
Um,
yeah.
I mean,
In
is there a
certain
game that does that? A game,
MMORPGs
I
and
think a
equipment,
game, but I think a game with a very high player base that is well respected, that has a good esports scene, doesn't have that. Like in WoW, you can buy a leveling, like you can level to 120 by buying a booster, but it doesn't give you the skill to click or do a world's first. You know, like in Apex, you can buy a skin,
yeah,
or
those are. Mhm.
let's say you buy a Predator account for Apex, right? That doesn't mean you're gonna play at a Predator level. you're gonna get shit on, and you're gonna de-rank your account to bronze or something. So skill, I think any well-respected game with a big player base won't allow a monetary factor to influence it. Even let's say they do allow, game boosts or whatever. I still think skill will out edge that person because there's a mental aspect as well. Like, what decision am I gonna make? Like, this gun now shoots 10% faster because I bought a boost. But if I don't know where to aim, if I don't know how to aim or where to move to or what building to occupy, there's so many more valuable variables that come into it than just the money aspect. So I think that would just never work
Yeah,
ever
that's kind
in
of
a
a gray
skill-based
area.
game.
Yeah, but it technically
Yeah.
makes you better, but not an automatic win.
But yeah, the money-based thing is still you can still make money by being absolute shit at Apex, right? You could still sell Apex not a good example. But let's say you're shit at WoW, but you know how to make gold, right? You're not doing missions or
Then you're
world's
not shit
first or
at
whatever.
WoW. If you know how to make
Yeah,
gold.
but WoW is about making gold.
Yeah.
WoW is about
You mean the PvP
doing
aspect,
dungeons.
I guess.
Yeah, exactly. You could be a great PvEer, I guess, but no one's famous for being good at slaying mobs. No.
Well, it's not fame, but people will know you, like the WoW players, if you have a lot of money, I guess. You
I
can buy
guess.
influence and stuff.
I mean, yeah, but that's like buying That's like buying friends with real life money. Like, are those really your friends? I don't think so. So,
I mean,
and that's like the
it's
money
more
with happiness thing that we got in the
it's
first
more
video.
fame than friends, I guess.
Yeah, but that has its own problems that come
Mm.
with that, right? Who are your real friends? Are they there for your fame, or are they there for your who you are? So,
I mean,
see.
the same argument could be made for the PvP as well. Like, if you are a good PvPer and you friend somebody who is also a good PvPer, then why are they
Yeah, but
there for?
yeah, but that brings us back to like the first video where, like, does money bring you happiness? Well, in this case, replace money with, does being good at PvP
I mean,
bring you
to
happiness
be
because of your friends?
to be fair,
It's difficult.
most of your friends are made via something in common, like either school or a common hobby, video game. So,
Yeah, but a
tech-
lot of them are just
mm,
through like shared experiences and shared thoughts and feelings, not things that have monetary value. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you can't buy a friend. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, that's almost impossible, I would say. No way you could
tech-
buy a friend. No way. You'd always in the back of your head, you'd be like, "Damn, I bought this guy."
that's fair. Yeah, I don't think I could, at least myself, could get over it if there was like
Yeah,
a power
no way.
imbalance.
I would cringe at myself every day
Yeah, like
if I knew that.
any kind of power imbalance, like either, for example, I don't know,
Mm.
being a huge streamer and playing with the viewer, or like, I don't know,
Yeah,
any kind
exactly.
of imbalance, not just money.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have like, is this fake? Is this not fake? Stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
you would just constantly doubt yourself and the entire relationship.
basically, yeah.
All right, I think that was a good 3 hours. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time for the last video. Like, it became way longer than
Yeah, I have to wake up
expected.
quite early tomorrow, actually. So
At least,
it's 6 a.m. wake up for me.
oh god, oh yeah, then definitely we should be
Yeah,
ending this moment.
unfortunately. I had fun though.
Yeah, this was a good podcast. I enjoyed it.
It was interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Well then, this was Viking and me. We talked about a lot of different economic topics today, and yeah, thank you guys for being here. I think this will be probably saved to YouTube or something. I'm not sure yet, but I might just save the raw footage even without editing. It could be a good thing to keep, especially if there will be more. Which, spoiler alert, there will be more episodes of this podcast with different guests, different topics. So stay tuned
Yeah,
for
what are
that.
you doing next week?
I think Aliens, right, with Zach.
Was that
So
word?
yeah, I think he was in my chat earlier. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll tune in for that for sure.
yeah, that should be an interesting topic. Hell, I might even look into it a bit more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
unlike economics, which I'm not really good at, I still enjoyed
You're
this
alien
discussion though.
expert.
Not really, but I like watching scientific videos like Kuzgazakt and so on, and
Mm.
reading blogs like Wait But Why. They all went into this kind of Fermi paradox and everything else. So I have
Gotcha.
a more background knowledge than from
A little more in
economics.
depth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So until
Perfect.
then, guys, see you next time.
See you guys.
Bye bye.